Chapter 1136. After improving his cultivation and induction swordsmanship, his third goal was to study the murderous grass. It was not that he did not value it, but it was not something that could be done overnight when it involved a brand new direction of great Tao. In the Tao state, it was an iron law to speed up and not achieve it. That was the Tao realm of creation for him. He did not get the fragment of creation because the creation had not collapsed. The reason why he studied the murderous grass was because it was temporarily useful, just like how he studied the great Tao of space and the negative space. Without a fixed plan and the help of the fragment of great Tao, he had to work hard in this area because of an accidental reason, which was not in line with the concept of cultivators. It was a last-minute effort to solve a headache, and the results could be imagined. This was on the basis that he had the foundation of these great Taos. If it were someone else, they would not even be able to touch the door. Therefore, to put the study of the murderous grass as the third, secondary position was in line with the cultivator's Tao heart. It was fine if he succeeded, but it was also fine if he failed. Under this kind of unavoidable delay, he finally had some rough understanding of the murderous grass in the past 10 years. This understanding not only came from the Tao of creation realm, but also from his own body that had been transformed by the small universe, as well as his deep understanding of the colors of nature. Every cultivator who came here would have their own research on the murderous grass and their own gains. Everyone, without exception, not only Lu Xiaoyi would do this, but to what extent they could reach, it depended on their own fate in this aspect. From this point of view, he was considered to have done quite deeply. Of course, he could feel that two great Taos had collapsed. However, he happened to be at a critical juncture of understanding the sea of grass, so he did not immediately go out to fight for it. He knew very well that this kind of fight would last for a very long time, just like the sea of grass storm would last for a very long time. What was the hurry? If he wanted it, he would definitely get it. It would not be good if he went early. If he snatched too much, he would be punished by heaven. Helping a friend? His friend might not be willing. Studying the response law of the sea of grass in a deeper level would be very beneficial for his future actions. Therefore, he felt at ease and sat down to watch the wind and clouds. He used the eyes of a big dumpling to watch the sea of grass, the surging waves of grass, the competition between humans and nature, and the competition between humans and the great Tao. It was very interesting. In recent days, he had gained some insights on the path of creation. He dare not say too much, but after nearly 10 years of observation and comprehension, he finally made some progress on the killer grass. The most intuitive reaction was that when he was surrounded by the killer grass, he was no longer as passive as when he was in the beginning, where he needed to cut the grass with his sword to maintain the scale of hundreds of killer grass entangling him. Now, he almost didn't need to cut the grass, and no more killer grass would come to bother him, even if the killer grass could sense that there was an alien among them. Now, he had made new progress. He could fuse his own power of providence into the vast power of providence in the sea of grass. He couldn't command them, but he could use what they sensed for his own use. In other words, the sea of grass was his eyes, and the sea of grass was his ears. The limitation was that the range of his perception was still too small and not wide enough. If he continued to research like this range would rapidly expand until the entire fragrant grass trail was within his perception range. Should he rush out and kill people to snatch the fragments? Or should he train his perception to the maximum so that he could not only hone his path of creation realm, but also completely grasp the position and movement of every great Tao fragment in the fragrant grass trail, and then pick them up without bloodshed? Of course, he would choose the latter. There would always be fragments. The sea of grass was so big. How could human cultivators know everything? If they could get it easily, why would they have to kill people to snatch it? In fact, in his heart, he still liked this kind of game that relied on wisdom to determine the winner. It was not easy. Taoists, monks, people chosen by the heavens in the main world, men, women, opponents, friends, who came here not to kill people, but to cultivate. Why would they want to cut off other people's paths? It was enough for him to have one path. Lu Xiaoyi considered himself to be a very perceptive person. He did not see any enemies here. Even if it was a Buddhist disciple, he would not attack without a reason. His killing had always been for a reason, and not for the sake of killing. It was also good to watch the show. Maybe when his eyes and ears were wider, he would be able to see what the snot worm Qing Xian was up to. What kind of shameful tricks were they up to? Exposing their ugliness when there was no one around? He couldn't wait any longer. What was interesting was that before he saw his friends, he first saw their companions. Yes, it was the three women dressed in palace robes. He was actually a little curious about those who wore palace robes. In his previous life, there were perverts who liked them. Of course, he was not a pervert, but why not set a small target first? Let's not care about the three snotworms for now. Let's see why the beauties were in such a hurry to fly over. Those three were also ruthless. They obviously noticed the existence of a big dumpling like him, but they did not have the slightest intention of coming over to help. Sigh. Once a woman hardened her heart, ordinary men really could not compare to her. After flying for a few days, the three sisters were close to the scene of the fight for the fragments. The grass tide was getting more and more turbulent, and the pressure of traveling in it was also increasing. In any case, there were still three of them. Fortunately, they did not split up at that time. This was really a lucky choice. At that time, they split up for the sake of their Tao heart, the responsibility of an individual cultivator. But what happened next proved that if they had followed their Tao heart at that time, perhaps it would have been a different scene. They might not have been injured, but at the very least, they would not have been able to handle it as easily as they did now. The heavenly Tao was just this tormenting. The area they came to was already being fought over by three cultivators. In the current sea of grass, this was already considered very rare. They discovered that the area with the most people fighting over it was actually 7 or 8 people, and no one was willing to give way to them. Their aura could not be concealed, because the waves of grass caused by them were the most conspicuous sign. On this point, they admired senior martial brother Xiaoyuan, who could appear and disappear like a ghost. To be able to achieve a certain degree of noiselessness in the sea of grass, that was a true expert, the embodiment of the highest level of strength. Fortunately, there was no such existence in the origin world. What should we do? Rush over and fight for it directly? Or use some other method? Crimson Moon laughed. Other method? What other method can there be right now? I dare say that as long as we get close, they will definitely team up to deal with us first. Third sister, why don't you use the honey trap first? As the eldest sister, although Lan Mei's strength was slightly inferior to Crimson Moon's, she had a special skill in the Tao of perception. That's not right. This fragment is not slaughter. It's impermanence. Chapter 1137. The Impermanence Grand Tao. It was rare to see a fragment of the Impermanence Grand Tao in the fragrant grass path. An environment like the sea of grass was more attractive to slaughter shards, but it was hard to say how it would affect impermanence shards. Even so, it was not surprising for impermanence shards to appear anywhere. Therefore, the competition was very fierce, and no one was willing to give way. It was easy to encounter slaughter shards here, but difficult to encounter impermanent shards. The Impermanence Grand Tao was a path that very few people regarded as their lifelong cultivation path. This was because it was not very helpful to cultivators in battle and was not direct enough. Comparatively speaking, those old masters who were involved in research spent more effort on impermanent shards. However, every cultivator had some understanding of impermanent shards because it was related to the development of their own skills. For the cultivators who remained in the sea of grass, it was a pity to abandon it. This was a common mentality because cultivators did not have the confidence to fuse with this impermanent shard. If they spent a lot of effort and still failed to fuse with it, it would be meaningless and a waste of time. This was why only 3 people fought over it, even though impermanent shards were rare. The 3 Heaven's Choice sisters were in the same situation. Crimson Moon asked, "Big sister, third sister, are you interested in the shard?" Her meaning was simple. If they were interested, they would fight for it. If they were not, they might as well leave early and look for another place. Qianzi was straightforward. I don't need it. Cultivation variables are the most troublesome thing for me. I can't even avoid it normally. So how would I dare to touch it? But big sister, Lan Mei was not pretentious. I'm interested. Compared to the slaughtered Ran Dao, impermanence is more meaningful to me. Second sister, third sister, help me. Let's see if we can find any opportunities here. Crimson Moon confirmed again. Big sister, are you really interested in it? And not because it's easier here. Lan Mei said, why should I be polite with you? Second sister, you're making trouble again. Crimson Moon was worried that Big Sister would take care of them too much and go against her wishes because there were fewer people here. Hearing Big Sister's words, Crimson Moon smiled. If that's the case, what else is there to say? Let's go straight to the point. With our strength, we can't always rely on others to help us, right? The three women's heroic spirits surged. This was a confident choice. The three of them were above average cultivators here, so there was no need for them to be timid. Their opponents were 3 spell cultivators, which was the most common occupation in the Sea of Grass. Their battle style was also the most mainstream. As soon as they came into contact, they immediately joined forces to deal with the 3 tigresses that harbored malicious intentions. The battle was fierce and thrilling. Because of the dangerous environment, they had to deal with the omnipresent killer grass while dealing with the enemy. In this kind of situation, having cooperation and not having cooperation became very important. The 3 female cultivators of the Hao Kingdom came from the same orthodoxy, and the advantage of being together day and night gradually displayed its might. A blood-red haze enveloped the battlefield. This was their Tao, the post-celestial Great Tao, Red Haze Tao. Although it looked similar to the Blood River Tao, its mechanism was completely different. The root of the Blood River Tao was the destruction of the innate Tao, while the root of the Red Dawn Tao was creation. They were completely different. This was also one of the very few post-celestial Great Taos that belonged exclusively to women. Men couldn't cultivate it because they didn't have this ability. It was also because of this that the 3 cultivators of the origin world were particularly unfamiliar with the Red Dawn Tao. Because of this, they would make mistakes in their judgment, and mistakes in their judgment would lead to flaws. Under the premise that their cultivation was inferior to the 3 Kuan cultivators, the signs of defeat quickly appeared. Seeing that they couldn't hold on any longer, the 3 cultivators could be considered to be able to pick up and let go. In the face of 3 powerful opponents, and under the premise that they might not be able to fuse with the impermanence fragment, there was no meaning in persevering. However, the 3 sisters weren't happy at all, because while they were fighting, several more cultivators rushed over. When they discovered that the Great Tao fragment here was impermanence, some immediately left, but there were also those who insisted on staying. A chaotic battle inevitably broke out. With this place as the center, a tide of grass grew stronger and stronger. What was worse was that there were still cultivators constantly joining in. It wasn't clear whether the tide of grass had attracted these people, or if there were cultivators maliciously spreading the news. The impermanence fragment was indeed not the first choice of most cultivators, but the cultivation world would never lack those mavericks. What was scarce was precious. This was an unchanging truth. In the chaos, everything was changing. The people were changing, and some were coming, and some were leaving. The tide of grass was changing, becoming more and more fierce. The impermanence fragment was also moving, and it was moving in the direction of the 3 female cultivators. It was a mess. There were already more than 10 cultivators gathered here, and more might come in the future. The 3 sisters felt that their small group had already lost the chance to fight for victory. The eldest sister, Lan Mei, was very decisive. There's no need to waste time here. Let's leave. Crimson Moon was still a little unwilling. Eldest sister, we can actually wait a little longer. Maybe there will be some good changes after they fight each other. Lan Mei was very determined. Second sister, third sister, you don't have to think about me. The 3 of us don't have only one goal for these 2 Great Tao fragments. The only thing we need to insist on is that we can't easily put ourselves in danger. There are many experts among these people, and there's even a swordsman body cultivator among them. There's no need for us to pull chestnuts out of the fire. Besides, we don't know how many more people will come in the future. This was a rational decision, but no matter how rational they were, they could not resist change. Just as they were about to withdraw from the battle and retreat, a person appeared and changed their decision. "Senior brother, are you here for the impermanence fragment?" Lame looked at Xiao Yuan, who had suddenly appeared, and immediately realized that this senior brother must have been secretly following them, ready to lend a hand when the time came. To Xiao Yuan, rather than flying around the world in the fragrant grass, it was better to follow one and achieve his goal most effectively. This was a show of affection. The reason was a long time ago, when they were all Jin Dan. Qian Zi was Xiao Yuan's Dao companion. Later on, they separated for some reason and parted on good terms. Their feelings for each other were still there, which was why Xiao Yuan had spared no effort. If he was just following them, Xiao Yuan would not have shown himself so easily. With his strength, he had the ability to help them in the most covert way possible. Since he had taken the initiative to appear now, he must have other intentions. Xiao Yuan smiled slightly. "I won't hide this from my junior sisters. My heart is for the impermanence fragment, and it surpasses killing. Therefore, although this fragment was rare, I was determined to get it. There are too many disruptors in the origin world, and it will be very difficult for me to deal with them alone. Therefore, I would like to ask the three of you to help me cover for me. This little brother will be eternally grateful." The three girls nodded in unison. "Since senior brother has the heart, the three of us are willing to help." Chapter 1138. P.S. Looking for monthly votes. Seeing that Old Depraved is having a hard time, everyone should tip him. At the very least, he should be in the top 10 in terms of monthly votes. Isn't that too much to ask for? Xiao Yuan clasped his hands and didn't try to be pretentious. Cultivators like them were here to help each other, and there was no such thing as asking for repayment. Just cover them and keep them occupied. Junior sisters, you don't have to take the risk. Also, don't reveal that you know me. That way, it'll be easier for you to escape if something happens. Lame nodded. "Senior brother, just give us your orders. But these people are fighting in a mess, so senior brother needs to set up a plan first. Otherwise, if we become the target of public criticism, it'll be easy for them to band together." Xiao Yuan was also very cautious. With his strength, these cultivators were no match for him, but in the current environment, there were too many factors to consider. No rush. There are still cultivators rushing here. Although it'll be easier to make a move now, it won't solve the problem in the future. It'll be an endless fight, and there'll never be peace. Let's just keep a distance. Looking at the situation, I estimate that within a month, those who should come will come, and those who should leave will also leave. We'll wait for the people to settle down before making a move. We'll try to settle it in one battle. The three girls nodded. This was a very good strategy. A month wasn't a long time, and it would be difficult for the other Dao fragments to settle down. In such a complicated environment, there was a limit to how much time the cultivators had to fuse together. The slightest interruption would cause all their previous efforts to go to waste. Therefore, there was no rush. The three girls retreated from the battle, but they didn't leave and just kept a distance. There were still a few people like them in the field. Those who rushed in a fight were all impulsive, and those who were cunning were all waiting for the people to settle down. It was very certain that at least half of those who stayed here to fight would leave when they realized that things weren't going well. Those who stayed behind would definitely be determined to get the fragments. In reality, this number wasn't very high because there were many troublemakers in the cultivation world. The more chaotic it was, the more energetic they would be. For example, the swordsman in the field now. He came and went, stirring up a sea of grass all by himself. He didn't have a fixed fight with anyone. He fought, ran, came back, touched, and ran again. He was really annoying. Qian Zi frowned. Why are all the swordsmen in the main world like this? He's like a sh*T stirrer, but he's nowhere near as responsible and efficient as us Heaven's Choice swordsmen. Xiao Yuan laughed coldly. Look at his swordsmanship. It's actually similar to the swordsman we killed before. They should be from the same sect. Such a person is the source of the calamity of the great Tao. If this person dares to stay here in the end, I don't mind sending him to the afterlife. Fei Yu carefully observed. Senior apprentice brother, this person seems to be stronger than the previous one. Looking at the momentum of his sword, I found it difficult to find any trace of it. Senior brother, don't be careless. Xiao Yuan sneered. Don't worry, junior apprentice sister. I've never been careless in a battle. Although he was much stronger than the previous swordsman, his roots were still the same. I won't waste time with him on the sword. A battle of life and death isn't limited to the sword. Let's wait and see. When he's done with his foolishness, it'll be the moment he dies and his Tao vanishes. The chaos intensified as everyone tacitly fought and fled. Every few days, there would be cultivators who couldn't withstand the harassment of the sea of grass, or who were injured by their opponents, leaving. This place was a touchstone, and the standard was constantly raised. Those who couldn't withstand it could only give up. It was impossible to leave anyone behind who was so shameless. There were also 2 cultivators who lost their lives. They had overestimated their own strength, were greedy, and used too much strength. They didn't deserve any sympathy. As the chaos continued, more and more people left, and more newcomers joined. The battle group started with 12 people, but at most, it had gathered 30 people. As time passed, the number of new cultivators decreased, and the number of cultivators who left increased. After a month, when there were no more newcomers, the number of cultivators stabilized, and the group returned to its original size. These were all cultivators who refused to give up on the Anitya Hellguard fragment. Including the 3 girls and Xiao Yuan, there were 13 of them. The 3 girls suddenly realized that they had followed the movement of the Great Tao fragment and returned to the area near the Big Dumpling. Their chance was here. The only strange thing was that the Big Dumpling was exactly the same as the one they saw before. The number of grass wrapped around it didn't increase or decrease. Did this mean that the cultivator inside was still persevering? Xiao Yuan had already made up his mind. This was the chance he had been waiting for. However, there was still a variable. What's up with that guy who's being wrapped around? Do you know? Lan Mei smiled and said, He's been like this since a month ago. Maybe there's something wrong with him? He's been wrapped around by the grass all this time. Xiao Yuan nodded. This wasn't strange at all. This was the most common problem for cultivators who lacked self-awareness. They wanted to participate, but they didn't have enough strength. In the end, they were trapped here awkwardly and could only passively wait for the sea of grass to pass. They also had a hope that the cultivators passing by wouldn't cause trouble. Since the Big Dumpling was formed before the chaotic battle began, it couldn't be a trap set by someone. He was very cautious. This was a necessary quality for a true expert. There were 13 people. Excluding the 4 of them, there were still 9 opponents. Among them, the more troublesome ones were the swordsman, the individual cultivator, and the 2 spell cultivators. Junior sisters, it's time. We can't wait for them to come to their senses and join forces. We have to make the first move and try to kill the strongest ones among them, scaring the rest away. Lan Mei nodded. In that case, we'll go in first. Senior brother, you look for an opportunity to make your move. Do you need our help? Xiao Yuan smiled conceitedly. No need. You just have to worry about stirring up the situation. Leave the killing to me. The 3 girls joined the fight, causing the battle situation to become even more complicated. In such a battle, killing wasn't the primary goal. Instead, it was stirring up the sea of grass, causing the already existing sea of grass to become even more ferocious. It was like 2 people rowing a canoe. They stood in a T-shape and lowered their waists to get off the horse. They swayed the canoe left and right, causing the canoe to sway even more. From time to time, they would exchange punches and kicks to see who would be the first to fall off the canoe. However, there were 13 people rowing the canoe in the sea of grass. It wasn't just punches and kicks, but also spells and sword techniques. Whichever was more powerful and had a wider area of effect would be chosen. The cultivators were like mortals holding onto a wooden plank and floating in a hurricane on the sea. Life and death were decided in their hearts. and whether to leave or stay depended entirely on their will. Everyone was shaking the sea of grass madly. Until now, no one cared if they could withstand such extreme torment. The only thought in their minds was, if I'm in trouble, then don't think you'll be in trouble too. If we're going to fall into the water, then we'll all fall into the water together. No one can dream of being clean and refreshed. Under such a strategy, the battle was often intermittent because there wasn't a stable environment for continuous attacks. Leaving after a fight was the norm. It wasn't that he wanted to leave, but that he had no choice. It was the same for those who were being beaten. Even if they counterattacked, they might not be able to find the person they really wanted to attack. Instead, they could only catch one person at a time. This was because they didn't have the time or energy to determine their positions and who should be attacking. Chapter 1139. P.S. Looking for monthly votes. Seeing that Old Depraved is having a hard time, everyone should tip him. At the very least, he should be in the top 10 in terms of monthly votes. Isn't that too much to ask for? Song Rong was very excited at first, but after his excitement subsided, he couldn't help but want to curse. Originally, this kind of fighting style was most suitable for swordsmen. If one's attack didn't hit, he would escape 1,000 miles away. This was the essence of sword manipulation. At the start, he had relied on this to gain quite a bit of advantage. But as the canoe swayed more and more violently, the battle environment became more and more dangerous. The sea of grass became more and more violent, and escaping became more and more difficult. It was impossible for him to be able to move around without a trace like in the normal universe. And because the influence of the environment was everywhere, and the more intense it became, the more the cultivators were affected. It was a test of their basic skills. For example, the reserve of magic power, the refinement of their spirit, the versatility of their methods, the use of supplementary skills, the training of their bodies, the level of their defenses. These things were constantly testing the cultivator's nerves. Regardless of whether you had an opponent or not, as long as you were in this battlefield, you would not be able to escape from the sea of grass. And the holistic nature of magic cultivators made it easier for them to survive in the sea of grass. As for swordsmen, under such pressure, they didn't have much time to breathe. They were used to erupting, escaping, recovering, accumulating power, and erupting again. This kind of method was very awkward here because the pressure of the sea of grass forced them to erupt continuously. But this canoe had to be stepped on and swayed continuously because he didn't want to give up. He didn't want to lose the chance to obtain the impermanence Tao fragment. There were 4 cultivators from Shadow Sword Palace who came to the fragrant grass trail. He, Zhou Fan, and the other 2 Yuaning brothers were all here for the Dao massacre. As for the others, they were either not in Zhou Xian and didn't have any information on this, or they didn't approve of this method, or they weren't interested in the Dao massacre. The Sword Master didn't give any advice on this matter. Under such circumstances, they were allowed to make their own decisions. This was actually the method of all the large sections. They didn't encourage it, didn't support it, but they didn't oppose it either. For people from the Shaking Shadow sect had come. In terms of proportion, this was much higher than those from the upper sects. As far as they knew, upper sects like the Carefree Travel sect only had a single-digit number of cultivators who came to the fragrant grass trail. Everyone came in at the same time, but they soon separated. Firstly, they didn't team up like the 3 female cultivators at the Red Dawn Avenue. More importantly, they had the mentality. To a swordsman, he had to find his own destiny by himself. If they found a team, who would it belong to? There was no need to ruin the friendship between brothers. His luck was not bad. At the beginning of the descent of the Great Path Shard, he had encountered a slaughter shard that had fallen very close to him. Then, he had managed to successfully fuse it before the others arrived. He had accomplished his purpose for coming here. The opportunity to obtain a fragment of an Anitya Hellguard is a gift from the heavens. I can't miss it. Therefore, he had no intention of retreating at all. Song Rong was very clear in his heart, because there were too many people. Even if his strength was considered outstanding among them, he was only outstanding. one body cultivator, two spell cultivators, and the three heavens chosen female cultivators were all existences that couldn't be underestimated. The hope was very small, but it was worth the effort because he actually had nothing else to do. In such a situation, there wouldn't be anyone to control the situation. That required a powerful strength that was completely above everyone else. He didn't know who could do that. Perhaps the only exception was the elusive swordmaster. Regarding risks, he had his own control. He wouldn't do anything that he couldn't do. After interacting with the swordmaster for a long time, he was very clear that the swordmaster's philosophy was actually very much against the impulse to fight to the death. It was too irrational. The current situation was like this. Among the 13 cultivators, he had no helpers. Secondly, he didn't have the strength to crush them. He could only choose to fight guerrilla warfare, adjusting his strategy according to the situation on the spot at any time. Because he had the massacre shard in hand, his basic goal had been achieved. Therefore, he was relaxed and appeared to be able to advance and retreat freely. Among all the cultivators present, he belonged to the category of the slippery type. He really didn't hold back and didn't go overboard. It was also because of this cautious attitude that he was able to avoid the first round of attacks from a certain ambusher. In the ambusher's plan, he was the first in line. The unlucky one was the body cultivator, not for anything else, but because to the ambusher, swordsman and body cultivator were the greatest threats to him in such an environment. Spell cultivators didn't have enough explosive power. In such an intermittent battle, it was very difficult for them to form a continuous attack. Song Rong observed the other 12 opponents very carefully. This was a good habit that every outstanding swordsman had to master. In his opinion, other than the few cultivators who were more threatening, the other cultivators were very ordinary. This made his escape principle follow. He tried his best to stay away from those who were more threatening and to maintain a safe distance from those who were less threatening. This included the ambusher. Of course, he still didn't know who was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. This strategy made it impossible for Xiao Yuan to find a suitable opportunity to strike. In Xiao Yuan's mind, he knew that he only had one chance to make a surprise attack. After that, everyone would be on their guard, and it would be very difficult for him to kill them instantly. After all, this kind of terrible environment was very troublesome for him. Therefore, it was best to take away two people in one go. The ideal situation was to take away the swordsman and body cultivator in one go, and then slowly figure out the other spell cultivators. With the cooperation of the three Hao Gui sisters, it wasn't difficult to do this. However, because Song Rong's movements were erratic and he was too cautious, he realized that he couldn't find a chance to take away the swordsman and body cultivator. He could only settle for the next best thing and target the body cultivator and another powerful spell cultivator. The three Haogui sisters understood their senior's mentality very well. They knew that they didn't need to kill people in battle, and they couldn't do it. They only needed to create an opportunity to create chaos, or an opportunity to seal the area. Their domain was the domain of the Red Dawn, and of course, the sealing spell would be born from this domain. After a short period of battle, the sky was filled with red clouds, and a considerable amount of space was shrouded. They had already fulfilled the basic conditions to activate the Red Dawn sealing spell. Because they were in the midst of the grass storm, all area spells couldn't be completely suppressed by the crazed twisting of the killer grass. However, it didn't matter. As long as they had a few breaths' time, it would be enough for an expert like their senior to launch an attack. They were very cautious. Crimson Moon was the first to attack the enemy, and when she retreated, she was counterattacked and couldn't hold on. Naturally, Lan Mei and Qianzi stepped in to help, and instantly cast a sealing spell on the space around Crimson Moon. In this circle, other than the three sisters, there were 5 other cultivators, and one of them was a body cultivator. Xiao Yuan had been waiting for such an opportunity. He did not attack the body elementalist immediately, but instead attacked the spell elementalist who was trying to escape. This was the spell elementalist that he had high hopes for the strongest among all the spell elementalists present. Chapter 1140. The spell cultivator was depressed because he had been paying attention to the body cultivator swordsman and the 3 female cultivators. As soon as he was imprisoned, his sharp senses allowed him to escape from the red clouds. However, due to the suddenness of the situation, he did not pursue the direction of escape too much. Thus, he crossed paths with a fellow who had been behaving normally. The attack suddenly came down. It was a special treasure, the liquid mercury origin. It was like an extension of the attacker's body. It ignored his multiple layers of defense and directly broke through his nascent soul. Although he did not die immediately, his body began to melt under the encirclement of the killer grass. At this moment, he was somewhat envious of the motionless dumpling. He was still able to hold on, but he was about to become fertilizer for the killer grass. The wild tide of grass covered the Tao disappearing celestial phenomenon when the cultivator died to a certain extent, and also created the conditions for Xiao Yuan's next attack. Before most of the cultivators could react, he had already appeared in front of the body cultivator. The body cultivator did not panic in the face of danger. Although this person appeared suddenly, he was not afraid of anyone in close combat. His dharma grew rapidly. The power of his blood surged, and his supernatural powers were activated. At this moment, he had an indestructible body of steel. He punched the Taoist who was close to him. The power of star destruction burst out. At such a close distance, he did not believe that there was a body of flesh and blood that could block his attack, unless the opponent was also a body cultivator, and in the end, both of them would be sent flying. However, reality was different for what he had imagined. His pair of iron fists seemed to have hit a layer of water curtain. Although it was empty, the layer of liquid instantly wrapped around his right hand and spread to his entire body at an extremely fast speed, including his huge head. It was as if 2 sharp objects were drilling into his temples. However, he knew that what was drilling was not a physical object, but an immense spiritual power. Immediately after, the body cultivator felt that his spiritual power was on the verge of going out of control, struggling back and forth between the bottom of the valley and the top of the waves. The weakness of the body meridians in cultivation was exposed. Their bodies were strong and their spiritual power was strong, but their spiritual power was weak. In other words, their spiritual power was far from the level of their physical power. This strange phenomenon only lasted for 3 breaths of time. After 3 breaths of time, the trapped cultivators all scattered in a panic, distancing themselves from the terrifying Taoist. Until now, they still did not understand who this person was. Main world? Negative space? Which domain? Or his roots? 13 people had turned into 11. Although it didn't seem like a big change, the psychological pressure brought by this strange, instantaneous kill was extremely heavy. Every cultivator was wondering what they would do if they were to encounter such a situation. There didn't seem to be any good solutions, especially in such a complicated environment. Once entangled, they would be covered like water. They would not have to worry about the pressure of the grass storm at all. All the pressure of the grass storm would be concentrated on the victim. This was simply too unfair. The 11 of them fell into a temporary stalemate. With such a terrifying person by their side, who would dare to fight recklessly? If he couldn't get the fragment, he would lose his life for nothing. After a while, 3 cultivators made their choice and quietly withdrew. They were the weaker cultivators in this group. They were not stupid. Seeing that this strange person had attacked the stronger cultivators first, they knew that he was going to wipe out the weaker ones next. They did not have the confidence to do so, so in order to protect themselves, they naturally chose to withdraw. Among cultivators, there were still many intelligent ones, especially spiritual cultivators. They would carefully weigh the pros and cons before making a choice. This was Xiao Yuan's goal. Kill 2, scare away 3, and among the remaining 8, half of them were cultivators of the heaven's chosen realm. Even if they fought fair and square, they were confident of victory. But he didn't want to meet force with force. As an expert, He knew very well how terrifying the counterattack before death was when the opponent was prepared. And in such a complicated situation, even getting injured was unacceptable. It meant that there would be much less he could do. Therefore, it was still better to attack mentally. I'll kill whoever goes to get the fragment. There are countless opportunities in the grass sea. You can hang yourself on a tree and die, but you can also take a step back and see the world. My promise is that whoever retreats now, if we meet in the future, I won't touch him. Instead, I'll help him. Xiao Yuan's words struck fear in their hearts. Among the remaining 4 cultivators, another 2 sighed and retreated. The situation now was very clear. The 3 female cultivators attacked and defended as one and were strong contenders. That strange man's strength was unfathomable, and he even used the path of a sneak attack. This made them unable to use their strength. On the other hand, each of them had their own thoughts. When they were in danger, how could they count on them? To deal with such a sneak attack, the most important thing was to have 1 or 2 close friends to help. But where could they find them now? In the end, only the swordsman and another powerful spiritual cultivator were left. The spiritual cultivator was a little unwilling. With so many people leaving, he saw hope again. If he could come to an agreement with the 3 female cultivators, they might be able to deal with this strange man. As for the swordsman, he was a one-track-minded creature. If they fought, he would definitely attack the strange man. There was no need to think about it. Therefore, he linked his divine senses and faced the 3 female cultivators. This demon is fierce, and his skills are strange. I wish to join forces with the 3 of you to get rid of this demon. As for the shard, I am willing to give it to the 3 of you. Are you willing? His little calculations were very delicate. He knew that the 3 female cultivators were from heaven's choice, but he deliberately did not mention it and pretended not to know. He wanted to make the 3 of them let down their guard. Once they really got rid of the strange man, he would use the difference between the 2 dimensions to drive the 3 female cultivators away with the swordsman. He could see very clearly that the strange man was a great enemy. He had to be eliminated first. Otherwise, no one would have peace. The 3 female cultivators were very strong, but they were women after all. He and the swordsman were not weak either. If they joined forces, they could definitely put up a fight. As for how to split the impermanent shard and the swordsman after the 3 female cultivators were driven away, that was the final problem. At the very least, this was a feasible way. It was much more promising than doing it blindly. A cultivator's pursuit of the great Tao was in tireless planning. Chenggu was happy to lose. Some people would choose to give up, while he would choose to forge ahead. Who could say for sure who was right and who was wrong? At the very least, once he had planned and worked hard, there would be no regrets. His little abacus was loud and clear, but who knew that someone would not follow his script? Before the 3 female cultivators could reply, the unlucky and impulsive swordsman had already rushed forward and attacked the strange man with his sword. At the same time, his body moved in the opposite direction towards the shard. He even laughed loudly. Others may be afraid of you, but I, the swordsman, will never be threatened. I want this shard. What can you do about it? Chapter 1141. Everyone knew that the swordsman was impulsive, but no one thought that the swordsman would be so brainless at a time like this. What would happen if no one helped him with his recklessness? If they didn't discuss the distribution of benefits, how could they work together? However, Song Rong's actions seemed to be in line with everyone's perception of the swordsman's character. Xiao Yuan narrowed his eyes. The swordsman still didn't know what was good for him at a time like this. This made him very annoyed. He thought that he would have to let the swordsman go this time, but who knew that this guy really didn't know what death was? Since that was the case, he didn't mind making an example out of him. Lan Mei transmitted her divine sense. Senior brother, do you need me to hold back the other spell cultivator? Now that the situation is settled, there's no need to hide our relationship anymore, right? Xiao Yuan was still cautious. No, this spell cultivator is very cunning. Once you attack, he'll definitely see that we're also from heaven's choice. I don't have the confidence to kill the swordsman in one blow, and this spell cultivator will very likely escape and spread the news of what happened here. I won't be able to help our people anymore, and you guys will become accomplices and targets. Just wait and pretend to be polite with the spell cultivator and hold him back. Once I've dealt with this swordsman, everything will be fine." After he finished speaking, he moved forward, allowing the flying sword to pass through his body. However, it only passed through a puddle of liquid, and the killing Tao realm of the flying sword had no effect at all. It was only at this time that he revealed his method of facing the enemy head-on, and it was actually a spell cultivator's method. Song Rong was full of pride and didn't care about Xiao Yuan's fearsomeness at all, as if he didn't know that Xiao Yuan had taken the lives of 2 cultivators in an instant. Instead, he moved around freely, displaying his swordsmanship to the extreme. Moreover, he didn't leave the shard's side, and he didn't go far from the silent big dumpling. His fearlessness made Xiao Yuan unable to kill him for a while. This was the change in mentality during a battle. It was an extremely important factor in a cultivator's battle, and also the reason why he had to ambush and kill the 2 of them. For cultivators, the use of force was extremely important. It was not that he liked to launch sneak attacks, but when he was facing multiple enemies, gaining the upper hand by a show of strength could give him a huge psychological and imposing advantage. Under such pressure, his opponents would often hesitate to attack for fear of breaking the vases and would not be able to fully display their characteristics. The more they fought, the more aggrieved they became, and the more aggrieved they became, the more passive they became. In the end, it would be out of control. However, all of this was useless against the arrogant swordsman. The swordsman acted as if he was facing off against an opponent of the same level as himself. He was very relaxed, and he was very excited. He was not discouraged by the fact that he was at a disadvantage at all. He was a barbarian. Such a one-track mind had no future. He would not be able to escape this calamity today. Song Rong unleashed his sword talent to his heart's content, but under the dual attacks of his opponent and the sea of grass, he soon fell into a passive position. He was very depressed because his flying sword was useless against this strange Taoist. If a swordsman's flying sword could not make his opponent feel threatened, then what was the point of his battle? He was also very clear that in order to break his opponent's liquid mercury state, he would need to work on his Tao realm. However, he only had 2 Tao realms, the Slaughter realm and the Yin-Yang realm. These 2 Tao realms could not help him hurt his opponent. This was awkward. There were many reasons for this. His understanding of the Tao realm was not comprehensive enough, and the depth of his Tao realm was superficial. These were not things that could be solved in a battle. It was only because Xiao Yuan's spell ability was far inferior to his close combat ability that he was able to hold on until now. Even if his flying sword could not hurt his opponent, it could at least break his spell, right? As long as he was fast enough, Xiao Yuan would not be able to stick to him and would not be able to do anything to him. Even so, a swordsman who could only passively defend was not a real swordsman. No matter how fast he was, his speed would be greatly reduced in the sea of grass. Moreover, Xiao Yuan's teleportation was not inferior to his. The worst thing was that the stubborn Song Rong did not leave the area around the shard. He constantly moved around the shard and used the hundreds of huge rice dumplings that were wrapped up by the slaughter grass as cover. Seeing Xiao Yuan's spells hitting the rice dumplings, he did not know whether the cultivator inside was dead or alive. Crimson Moon frowned. This swordsman may not be as straightforward as he appears to be. Seeing that we are not helping him, he wants to attack the rice dumplings. He doesn't know that the cultivator inside has been in this state for almost 2 months. If it wasn't for some special reason, how could he be wrapped up like this? Hoping that the person inside the rice dumplings will come out is a fantasy. If he really comes out, how can a person who can't even deal with the sea of grass be of any help? The spell cultivator agreed. He was still working hard, hoping to get the 3 girls to join him in attacking the monster. He was not confident that he could help the swordsman alone, so he had to bring the 3 girls with him. Junior sister, you're right. The swordsman is a man who shouts slogans loudly, but he's actually a dirty man behind his back. And greedy. However, he's still a good fighter, being able to last so long in front of this monster. Junior sisters, if you have the confinement technique from just now, leave it to me to deal with this monster's liquid mercury. I have the Tao of unification to deal with this kind of monster. I can definitely break it. His words were 30% true, 30% false, and 40% nonsensical. Whether or not the Tao of unity could solve the problem of the strange man's liquid mercury was only a theoretical story. He had indeed reached the Tao of unity, but whether or not his depth in the Tao of unity could solve the problem of liquid mercury was another story. He would never know the answer if he did not try. However, he had to say it with certainty now to dispel the worries of the three sentimental female cultivators. Lan Mei pretended to agree, but was actually delaying. Oh, senior brother has this kind of ability? You're not fooling us, are you? Can the Tao of unification handle this kind of liquid mercury? We can't even see the foundation of this Taoist Tao. The cultivator sneered. Although I'm not this monster's match, we Orthodox Taoists are the best at seeing the foundation of the Tao of humanity. Don't be fooled by his liquid mercury form. It's actually just a mutation of the Tao of chaos. The reason why he wants to snatch the Tao of impermanence is because he wants to use the changes of impermanence to deepen the chaos. Junior sister, we can't hesitate anymore. If we continue to hesitate, I'm afraid that swordsmen won't be able to last long. While his words were still ringing in their ears, the two sides in the universe who were chasing each other suddenly changed. Xiao Yuan had already known that the swordsman was using the big rice dumplings to evade him. This time, he had already calculated the path. When the swordsman hid behind the big rice dumplings, he activated the close distance in advance. His body turned into liquid mercury and went straight through the rice dumplings. He was about to catch the swordsman. In everyone's opinion, the big rice dumplings were no different from dead objects, so there was no need to consider them. Unexpectedly, the liquid mercury swept away the killer grass, but it did not avoid the person in the rice dumplings and hit the person in the rice dumplings in the face. That person seemed to be very surprised. Who shot me? What's that? King Wasp paddle? Chapter 1142. The three ladies and the spell cultivator were dumbfounded. They thought that this was the swordsman's first successful defense, relying on the death of the big rice dumpling to escape from the pursuit. But to his surprise, this time, the liquid mercury face did not immediately trigger the opponent's mental frequency like before. Instead, it was like a real liquid that directly penetrated the big rice dumpling's temple without stopping. The liquid mercury was no longer stuck to the face, and the three ladies could see through it. It was actually a familiar face, the Taoist Zhou Xian whom they had traveled together with for more than a year on the fragrant grass trail. He seemed to be called One Ear or something. It was just that they had never spoken before. They did not expect that their next meeting would be an eternal farewell, and in such an unlucky way. The next moment, the Tao disappearing celestial phenomenon appeared. The four of them thought that it was the big rice dumplings celestial phenomenon, but seeing that this fellow was still alive and kicking, it seemed like he was not dead. What happened? It happened so suddenly that they could not think of any other possibilities. They also did not expect that the arrogant Xiao Yuan would have an accident. However, someone helped them to tell the truth, and Song Rong was grinning from the side. Boss, how's the taste? Is it very nutritious? Lu Xiaoyi burped and sighed in satisfaction. He pointed at the fragment and said, the nutritious food is not bad. I'm a little full. Go. The fragment is your reward. Song Rong laughed and swaggered over, as if there was no one around him, and began to fuse with the impermanence fragment. During this process, none of the four spectators dared to make a move. This was because there was a man-eater who was even more terrifying than the previous ambusher Xiao Yuan. The three sisters did not dare to move, even if their hearts were being twisted by knives. Before they came, The heaven's chosen cultivators had already agreed to not expose their intention of joining forces to obtain the Tao fragment at the fragrant grass trail. Because of the huge difference in numbers, the heaven's chosen cultivators would only be at a disadvantage if such a confrontation was established. This was the reason why Xiaoyuan kept asking them not to expose their relationship with him. Senior brother had already left, leaving them with a huge problem. Should they take revenge on the spot? Or should they pretend that they had nothing to do with it? Revenge was not a matter of whether there was a chance of success, but a matter of how many people could survive. Even though they didn't have an accurate understanding of this person, Yuan Ying's eyes were right there. Now, it seemed that the truth was very clear. This big dumpling obviously didn't bind himself here because he couldn't take it anymore. He was completely fine. He was just carrying out his own special cultivation. The reason why the swordsman went berserk for no reason and provoked Senior Xiaoyuan, who was far stronger than him, was not because he did not know what was good for him. It was because he had received instructions from his so-called boss. The reason why the fight revolved around the big rice dumpling was that the big rice dumpling was hiding his big backer. A big backer. Hairy leg. As for why senior brother Xiaoyuan ended up with the wrong face, that was because of the skill level. If One Ear's strength was truly that terrifying, it wouldn't have been surprising if Xiaoyuan had been killed in any way. It was just that the current situation was more shocking and disgusting. With this person here, along with a swordsman lackey and a powerful spell practitioner, there was no hope of fighting them head-on. This was the judgment of the three sisters. If the hard way didn't work, then he would use the soft way. The hatred in their hearts couldn't be forgotten. They still had a chance because they were old friends with this person. Moreover, they had never exposed their relationship with Xiaoyuan. Therefore, they still had a chance. It could be 3 against 1 in a secluded place, or they could use their beauty to seduce him. While their minds were racing, Faxiu was also worried sick. His plan had completely failed. The change was too great, and he couldn't think of a way to solve it. His heart trembled when he saw the man-eater looking at him. The so-called opportunity is obtained by the capable. I'm not capable enough, so I'll leave now. May I know your name? In the future, when I talk about it, I'll have someone to entrust it to. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. If you want to know my name, you can either be a friend or have fought with me. Which one do you choose? The Taoist sighed. He knew that this person was stubborn. After all his planning, he didn't expect that the swordsman would be the one to benefit. It was also fate. Seeing the spell practitioner leave, Lan Mei's face filled with smiles. Senior brother Shan, we meet again. The last time I passed by, I didn't know senior brother was meditating in the grass. I almost want to take a look. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. So, it's you 3 senior sisters. You can call me junior brother. I'm just a tender grass in the sea of grass. Seeing you today, it's really a small world. You and I are fated to meet each other again. Qian Zi's words were sarcastic. Her former Tao companion had been killed by this Zhou Xian, and she still hadn't recovered from the shock. A day as husband and wife meant endless devotion for the rest of their lives. Although they were no longer Tao companions, this was just a natural change in relationships in the cultivation world. It wasn't as if they had become enemies. Instead, they had a tacit understanding in many aspects. With Xiaoyuan's strength, he could be considered one of the top few Yuanying in the Heaven's Choice continent. How could he have died so inexplicably at the hands of others? Senior brother Shan, this is the first time I've seen a human cultivator eat someone. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. I don't eat it often. I need to eat it quickly. Now that I'm old, my teeth are loose, and I like to eat porridge or something. This person used his body as porridge and poured it straight into my mouth. It would be disrespectful to refuse. I'm ashamed to accept it. His words weren't completely a joke. Song Rong's irrational impulsiveness was, of course, incited by him. It wasn't because he liked to meddle in other people's business, but because through the transmission in the sea of grass, he found out about the massacre that had occurred in the previous battle. Yao Ying had lost another precious swordsman. How could a person not be stabbed when they were drifting in the universe? He wanted to come, but his strength wasn't enough, so he couldn't blame anyone. It was all for the great Tao fragment. This was a struggle for Tao, and as a cultivator, he should accept it. If he didn't know who the murderer was, he wouldn't have pursued the truth. But now that he knew, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Thus, he ordered Song Rong to provoke him. His goal wasn't just to kill Xiao Yuan, but also to kill the three beautiful accomplices. If he did it, he had to do it cleanly. With his incomparably rich combat experience, how could he not see the subtle cooperation between the murderer and the three women? He didn't expect that the three women would be able to keep their composure and prevent him from getting rid of them. It was a little regrettable. They wanted to play a honey trap with him? Didn't they know that he was famous for? It wasn't completely playing with fire. Most importantly, if the three women wanted to gain his trust, they would have to reveal some secret information about Heaven's choice. This was the best source of information. He didn't even need to deliberately ask, and they would rush to say it. Even if it wasn't everything, just a part of it would be enough for him to fully analyze. Otherwise, with his personality of being afraid of trouble, he wouldn't care about the future. He would have to eliminate the source of trouble now to be truly at ease. Chapter 1143. Lu Xiaoyi was chatting with the three beauties, pretending to be polite. He was very good at this. His words were witty and humorous, but this easygoing appearance was even more chilling when compared to the ruthlessness he showed when he was eating people. They had wronged Lu Xiaoyi, but Lu Xiaoyi would not explain. After observing for a long time in the big rice dumpling, he was also a little confused about Xiao Yuan's mysterious liquid mercury body. The Tao state in his flying sword was certainly not something Song Rong could compare to, but he suspected that even if he had a much stronger Tao state, he would not be able to cause any harm to Xiao Yuan, because it was not targeted. That Dharma cultivator still had some skills. Against the foundation of the Tao realm of chaos, only those in the Tao realm of unity could perfectly counter it. For example, he was proficient in destiny, 5 elements, massacre, merit, great void, and stars. It was difficult for him to achieve a quick victory. He needed to grind for a period of time and compare the depth of his Tao realm. For a cultivator who was used to sneak attacks, Lu Xiaoyi did not doubt that this guy would escape when he saw that the situation was not good. In a grass storm, the divine sense could not reach far, and the tracking distance would be greatly affected. If Xiao Yuan wanted to escape, he would not be able to catch up. He needed a way to kill him in one blow, so that he could not escape. Lu Xiaoyi's plan was to lure this guy into using his omnipotent state, liquid mercury state. This was in line with a cultivator's cultivation and battle philosophy. The strongest point could also be the weakest point. Song Rong had been dodging around the big rice dumpling, purposely exposing his dodging ability, so that Xiao Yuan could seize the opportunity to get close to him with liquid mercury. When that happened, Lu Xiaoyi, who was hiding in the rice dumpling, would be able to attack from the side and finish him off once and for all. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yuan's liquid attack did not take the usual route. It did not go around to catch Song Rong, but directly went through the rice dumpling. Even more surprising was that Xiao Yuan's liquid mercury state seemed to lack some intelligence and could not accurately distinguish between the real and fake targets. As long as it was a living thing, it would stick to it, and in the end, it was caught off guard. It wanted to ambush someone, but it was ambushed instead. Who knew if this was purely a coincidence? Or did Xiao Yuan see through something and directly attack the ambusher hidden in the rice dumpling? Since it was already plastered on his face, what followed next was the inevitable mental power oscillation. Lu Xiaoyi wasn't afraid of spiritual shock. He was confident that no one at the level of Yuanying had a stronger spiritual power than him. The accumulation from the foundation establishment stage to the reconstruction of the small universe was unparalleled and refined. However, he did not want to use this method of fight, because even if he defeated his opponent with the strange state of liquid mercury, he did not know if Xiao Yuan, who had the initiative, had the ability to escape. At the same time, he also realized that instead of competing with this guy in the Tao realm, it would be better to take advantage of the fact that he was in the liquid mercury mental state to devour him mentally. This was a bold and crazy idea, but since his debut, he had never lacked craziness in battle. Therefore, he didn't resist at all. Instead, the Sparrow Palace sucked the liquid mercury into the Sparrow God space. Suddenly, under the strong mental pressure, the two groups of spiritual power began a desperate struggle. Xiao Yuan's strength was at its strongest when he was in the state of mental mercury. But for the same reason, it was also because he was at his strongest when he was in his mental state that he lost all other means. Thus, he placed all his bets on his mental power. For most cultivators, no one could beat him in this kind of bet, but he met Lu Xiaoyi. This kind of mental contest was simple and direct. The strong was strong, and the weak was weak. There was no fancy way to win. In Lu Xiaoyi's territory, facing a freak like Lu Xiaoyi, Xiao Yuan's spiritual power collapsed instantly, and he couldn't use any other means. His body was gone. His spells were gone. His trump card was gone. Apart from his spiritual power, he had nothing. Therefore, his spiritual power was extinguished, and he disappeared. It was like a mortal dealing with a rock. You had countless ways to deal with it, but if you wanted to smash the rock with your head, the result would be obvious. When others fought against Xiao Yuan, they often died on the spot because they didn't know his background. Xiao Yuan fought against this strange big dumpling for the same reason. In a battle, if you didn't know beforehand and bet everything you had, you might win 99 out of 100 times. However, if you lost once, there would be no more future. It was unfair to say that Lu Xiaoyi ate people, but he did eat people. It was just that this person was in the form of a ball of energy. The whole battle couldn't be explained by human morality. If you don't eat him, are you going to wait for him to come and shock you? Song Rong was still gritting his teeth. Obviously, the Anika fragment was beyond his ability. Since he didn't want to give up, Lu Xiaoyi naturally wouldn't rush him. Everyone wanted to collect all of the Tao fragments, just like ancient collectors. Whenever they saw something good, they would light up, but could you really collect all of it? The only thing you could do was focus on a certain direction. Song Rong thought he knew a little about the Anika Dao, but he was still far from being able to fuse with the Anika fragment. Wame took a deep breath. From their conversation, she could clearly feel that this single-eared cultivator didn't trust them. She couldn't blame him for being suspicious. Based on the performance of the three sisters in this battle, any cultivator would be suspicious, even if there was no evidence. Therefore, they needed to be more proactive and honest. They couldn't treat others as fools. We know this person. His name is Xiao Yuan. He's a very famous character in the Heaven's Choice continent. Lu Xiaoyi was surprised. Oh, he's also from the Heaven's Choice continent? No wonder he doesn't attack you guys. He only knows how to kill people from the origin world. Yes, only I know that you guys didn't come together. If it was someone else, I'm afraid they would think that you guys are colluding. Senior sister, this little brother has one more thing to say. In the fragrant grass path, although we origin world cultivators have the advantage in numbers, we basically act alone. First, it's for the sake of our Tao heart. Second, it's to avoid direct confrontation between the world's powers. If others suspect that you Heaven's Choice continent cultivators are working together, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult for you guys to escape unscathed. Wame had no choice but to explain. Junior brother has been there all along. You should know that we were also helpless and didn't take the initiative to intervene. When Xiao Yuan attacked the swordsman, we also watched from the sidelines. We didn't take the opportunity to attack the other cultivator. Junior brother, are you also suspecting us? Lu Xiaoyi pretended to be magnanimous. Of course I wouldn't. This is the most basic judgment. It's just that with the vastness of the Heaven's Choice continent, you guys still know each other. It's a little inconceivable. Qianzi gritted her teeth. She knew that if she didn't say something shocking, she wouldn't be able to ease this person's suspicions. Some words could only be said by her. No one else could replace her. Senior brother doesn't know. The reason we know each other is because of this little sister. When we were in Jindan, we were once Tao companions. It's just that we parted ways for some reason. With this kind of relationship, we've always watched from the sidelines. Senior brother should know our attitude, right? Lu Xiaoyi was filled with deep veneration. So it's like this. Senior sisters, This little brother admires your noble character and unquestionable integrity. Although he said that, he was ridiculing in his heart. What's going on? Just because no one investigated, they were Tao companions? Just because someone investigated, they became former Tao companions. Chapter 1144. P.S. Monthly votes, monthly votes. Only when you have votes will I have motivation. Several hours later, Song Rong's eyes drooped as he finished his efforts. Senior brother, I'm afraid I won't be able to. How about you do it? Song Rong's efforts ended in failure. There were some things that couldn't be solved just by using all your strength, especially when it involved the Tao realm. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Senior sisters, why don't you give it a try? Treasures favor the fated ones. Who knows, maybe you'll succeed. Lan Mei was tempted, but she knew that this wasn't the time to be greedy. The three of them had come here for the slaughter shard. They had never thought that they would have a chance to fuse with the Hellguard, especially now. How could they compete with this man-eating monster? Lan Mei waved her hand hesitantly. Junior brother should go first. If there's no other way, we can try again. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Senior sisters, don't think that I'm being polite. There's a first-come, first-serve rule in everything. It's only right for me to be last. This is also the tradition of the Zhou Xian cultivators. Lan Mei couldn't win against his warm invitation. She was indeed interested, so she hesitated and finally walked up. This made Song Rong feel uncomfortable. Boss, are you using the Tao to buy sex? These guys were all spoiled by him. None of them knew how to speak properly. He could only explain, they can't take it away. Why don't I do them a favor? I say, Song Rong, what are you saying? Do I need to buy sex if I want sex? Dirty. Song Rong curled his lips. Boss, why do I feel like there's something strange about these three girls? Which realm are they from? Do you know them? Lu Xiaoyi reminded him. These three girls are from the Heaven's Choice realm. They're in cahoots with that liquid mercury freak. It's just that they're very clear on the surface. In the future, when you meet similar people, be more careful. The Heaven's Choice realm cultivators are all alone, so they often cooperate with others. Unless you know them, don't trust others easily. I think there's more than one freak like that freak. If you meet any shadow shaking realm cultivators, give them some advice. He didn't mention that a shadow shaking realm swordsman had already died at the freak's hands. If he said it now, Song Rong would lose his composure and affect his judgment. There was no need. He was the sword master and had the responsibility to control the situation. That's what I said. Such a unique skill. Even in normal space, I'm afraid I'm no match for him. Boss, are there many cultivators like Heaven's Choice? Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Extra my ass. Killing one would mean one less person. I just wanted to see if there were any more such people and also wanted to find out more information about Heaven's Choice. Otherwise, I wouldn't have kept these three alive. Song Rong laughed. I knew it. Since when has boss taken pity on women? She had always been the type to eat her fill and never admit it. Boss, and I'm just saying if you can't fuse with this Anitya Hellguard fragment, are you just going to let it drift away like this? Lu Xiaoyi snorted. There are no ifs when it comes to me. Lan Mei was still persevering there. Her beautiful brows were slightly furrowed. It was clear that things weren't going well, and things weren't going well. Lu Xiaoyi looked at the other two girls. Junior sisters, who's next? Crimson Moon didn't hesitate. I've already obtained a slaughter shard and achieved my goal. I shouldn't be too greedy, so I won't participate. Qianzi was equally determined. I've never liked to use my brain. I'm naturally disgusted by changes. There's no point in trying. I'll just embarrass myself. 4 hours later, Lan Mei stood up. Song Rong had tried for 6 hours. She shouldn't have taken any longer, so she gave up after 4 hours. There was no progress, so there was no point in trying again. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and walked over. Now you want it? Then I'll give it a try. I'm used to eating leftovers, so I have some experience. He was putting on an act here, but he couldn't stop immediately. It would only make people's imaginations run wild, so he could only drag it out as long as possible. Song Rong didn't understand, so he loyally guarded nearby. The three girls were too embarrassed to leave. After all, he had given their big sister a chance first. Even if he couldn't fuse with it in the end, they had to wait for him to speak first. This time, because he had plenty of time and someone was guarding him, he wondered if he could use the most traditional method to fuse with it. He didn't want to use the Sparrow Palace to swallow it. Because he had some foundation in the impermanence great Tao, it wasn't completely aimless. Impermanence was the truth of all phenomena in the universe. The Agama Sutra said, accumulation will eventually dissipate. Sublimity will eventually fall. Union will eventually separate. All good things return to one place described it as, impermanence is swift. Thoughts move. Stone, fire, wind, and lantern. Waning waves. Luwa movies. These were all principles that explained the impermanence of life. The three generations can't stop moving, so impermanence. All laws are born of fate, so impermanence. According to the speed of change, impermanence was divided into two types, thoughts of impermanence and first impermanence. Of all the things in the world, the thing that changed the fastest was the human mind. The birth and death of the mind didn't stop for a moment. It was faster than lightning. Thus, the Precious Rain Sutra described the mind as flowing water. Its birth and death didn't stop for a moment. Therefore, the mind was impermanence. First impermanence was called the body of all living things. Although their lifespans varied, they were all called first impermanence. Speaking of impermanence, it is known as the body of a cycle of retribution for all living beings. It is also known as a cycle of impermanence, the cycle of life, residence, and destruction. Living things were impermanent. Things were impermanent. The universe was impermanent. It was called the first impermanence. With a critical attitude, Lu Xiaoyi wandered around the world of impermanence, but he just couldn't find the door to enter. Many things were specious, many understandings were ambiguous, and many things were superficial. With his current understanding of impermanence, it was almost impossible for him to fuse with such a fragment. He wasn't much different from Song Rong and Lan Mei. This was normal cultivation. How long had it been since he learned that the impermanence great Tao might collapse? How could he be proficient in it? Song Rong was anxious. The sword master didn't seem to be able to do anything about this fragment, although he bragged so much just now. Of course, he wasn't anxious. It was his honor to be able to do something for his boss. Other swordsmen didn't have this opportunity. Besides, he had the slaughter fragment in his hand. There was nothing urgent to do. What he was worried about was that if this dragged on, other cultivators would hear the news and come over. Another battle ensued. He wasn't afraid of fighting, but he didn't want the sword master to be disturbed. His strength was limited. He could block one or two cultivators for the sword master, but he couldn't block anymore. The environment here was too noisy and complicated. You're so restless over there. You don't have any composure at all. You're making me dizzy. Song Rong heard his boss's voice. Song Rong's consciousness whispered, "Boss, can we do it? If we can't, let the three heavenly chosen female cultivators leave first. That way, if unfamiliar cultivators come, we won't have to worry about them. We won't even have to guard against them." The boss's voice. "Can we do it? How dare you ask such a question? Of course we can. I'm just afraid of hurting your fragile souls. If I retract it too quickly, you'll be too ashamed to show your faces. If I'm alone, I would have retracted it a long time ago. Do you really need a dawdle here?" Song Rong curled his lips. "Brag. Keep bragging. This is the boss's little problem. He likes to brag. It's not embarrassing if he can't fuse with the impermanence great Tao. There are many innate Taos. Even immortals can't be proficient in all of them, so why bother?" Chapter 1145. Lu Xiaoyi knew that it was impossible to fuse with the impermanence fragment directly, so he decided not to waste his energy. He turned his attention to the Sparrow Palace, where the liquid mercury was still being broken down and absorbed. Unlike what Ouyang Ming said, devouring Xiao Yuan's mental power was not a great tonic. Based on his character, he did not need to strengthen himself in such a way. He might be crazy and bold at times, but he was also extremely careful at other times. He didn't want other people's things. It was that simple. The Sparrow Palace was his core, just like the inner sword ball. He didn't want any foreign spiritual energy to exist, even if it was only in theory. However, this spiritual energy had to go somewhere. This was a headache for him. Where should he put it? 10 hours had passed. Song Rong was wandering in the periphery when he suddenly felt something. He hurriedly sent a message to Lu Xiaoyi. Boss, there are unfamiliar cultivators approaching, and there's less than one. Lu Xiaoyi stood up and used the sparrow god to sweep away the impermanence fragment. He laughed and said, "Thank you for your help. This poor Taoist can't thank you enough. When the time comes, let's continue our friendship." Song Rong was stunned. Was the boss bragging or not? Taking 10 hours to collect the fragment wasn't a very clever method, but it was too much of a coincidence. Did he collect it immediately after someone came? Or was he deliberately waiting for it to shock the world? Since the fragment had been collected, there was no reason for him to continue staying here. There were still a few of his brothers in the fragrant grass path. It was a good opportunity to walk around, find friends, and annoy enemies. He wouldn't follow the boss. If the boss wasn't comfortable, he wouldn't be either. The gap between them was too big. The three sisters were also a little sad. They thought that this man-eating thing couldn't do anything to the impermanence fragment, so they felt a little better. They didn't expect it couldn't be helped. Evil people always had bad luck. The heavenly Tao didn't have eyes. Of course, they wouldn't follow this guy. Some things needed to be buried in their hearts and wait for the right time. They couldn't stick to him all day long. What kind of secret could be kept all the time? The few of them reluctantly said their goodbyes, as if they were very close. In fact, each of them had their own ulterior motives. The three sisters had to continue looking for slaughter fragments, and so did Lu Xiaoyi. When everyone had left, Lu Xiaoyi used his spiritual sense to touch the killer grass beside him. Through the perception of the killer grass, he could clearly feel that the entire fragrant grass was about 30% of the area. This was already his maximum limit, and this was because of his cultivation level. He wasn't in a hurry. Compared to the blind men groping for an elephant, his perception through the sea of grass was much more accurate. With this perception, his heart was moved. In the space closest to him, there seemed to be a lot less perception than a month ago, which meant that a lot of slaughter fragments had been taken away. This amount was close to 30% of the original amount. There was something wrong with this. It was a little illogical. Only a cultivator like him, who was completely overwhelming, could easily drive others away in the fight for fragments. It was conceivable that in the case of the impermanence fragment, without the existence of Xiaoyuan and him, the 10 or so people would eventually develop into a protracted battle. It was not something that could be resolved in a short period of time. This almost represented the situation in all the locations where the fragments had appeared. This was because every place where a fragment appeared, there were more or less cultivators fighting over it. There were as many as 10 cultivators, and as few as 10 cultivators. Then, was there someone like him who had the ability to instantly take away a great path fragment? This was almost certain. This was because he had seen one in the ultimate, Yihang Bodhisattva. Until now, he still didn't know what method this monk had used to do this. The world of cultivation was full of strange things. If he could do it, others might be able to do it too. However, he couldn't think that he was the only one in this world. He really wanted to see what kind of person this monk was. What was he doing with so many fragments? Didn't he know that doing so would incur the jealousy of the heavens? Before the cultivators arrived, Lu Xiaoyi found a direction. If there was really such a person, in order to maximize the number of fragments he could obtain, he would definitely not run far. He would definitely circle around a relatively small area. All he needed to do was to wait for him. Because the distance was not far, he only spent less than 10 days on the road. Because he understood part of the mechanism of the killer grass's tide and could integrate part of himself into it, the current grass storm was no longer a threat to him. However, this was not a reason to be arrogant. Even in the ancient records of the sect before he came, he had seen many outstanding cultivators in history who could do this. They could walk in and out of the killer grass like it was flat ground. There were geniuses in every era, not to mention in this turbulent era. As he gradually approached, he found that there were quite a number of cultivators gathered here. There were about 20 of them. Because the killer grasses fragments were obtained too quickly, everyone realized that they had to give their all for every fragment. They could not retreat just because there were more fragments. If they retreated like this, sooner or later, they would end up with nothing. Everyone had this idea, so the competition was more intense. The Tao of Slaughter was a very popular Tao among the Yuanian cultivators. It was probably second only to the most mainstream Tao of the 5 elements and yin and yang. After all, in the universe, who did not want to have a certain level of fighting ability? If you could kill, but did not kill, that was magnanimity. If you could not kill, that was not killing because you were forced to. The Tao of Slaughter was the type of Tao that all Yuanian cultivators could come into contact with. Generally speaking, as long as a cultivator wanted to come into contact with the essence of slaughter, they would definitely be able to come into contact with it. However, whether it was deep or shallow depended on each person's talent, as well as their own encounters and growth experiences. Because of this, relatively speaking, almost all the cultivators who came here to search for fragments were proficient in the Tao of Slaughter. It was difficult to distinguish between their proficiency in the Tao of Slaughter when they fought against each other, because their proficiency in the Tao of Slaughter was often canceled out. However, their absorption of killer grasses fragments was relatively fast. For example, the 3 sisters of the Heaven's Choice Good Nation, who had to spend 2 hours to fuse with the killer grasses fragments, was not something to be proud of here. Everyone wanted to spend as much time as possible next to the fragments, but it was extremely difficult to do so under the watchful eyes of so many people. The competition was similar to the last time when Tsong Rong and the others fought for the Anitya Helgard's fragment. That was more than 20 people stepped on the dragon boat together. The dragon boat was like a roller coaster, and whoever could not hold on would be eliminated. Of course, during this process, there was no lack of attacks, sneak attacks, harassment. All kinds of large-scale spells were used. In fact, it was not to target a single person, but to make the tide of grass more violent and ferocious, driving away those who were not strong enough and only wanted to fish in troubled waters. Wherever the killer grasses fragment flew, the chaotic tide followed, forming a unique scenery. Chapter 1146. Lu Xiaoyi got closer to the center of the chaos and carefully looked around. He didn't find any familiar cultivators. In fact, with his connections over the years, other than Slug and the others, he didn't know many Yuanying from Zhou Xian, not to mention the cultivators from other realms of the Origin World and the Heaven's Choice continent. A newcomer didn't attract any attention from the cultivators present. This kind of situation happened many times. People came and left and came again, back and forth, back and forth. Only the 7 or 8 cultivators in the core circle were the ones that everyone needed to pay attention to. Lu Xiaoyi joined the crowd with great interest. His goal wasn't completely on the slaughter shard, but on who could instantly obtain it. This was a game. For someone with his strength, it wasn't difficult to complete the mission and obtain the shard to leave. The difficult part was how to find joy in it. There were quite a number of monks among the 20 cultivators. The 7 monks didn't help each other, but each did their own thing. This was a very smart method. If the monks dared to join hands, most of the remaining Taoists would immediately join hands. In terms of numbers, there were still more Taoists, at least on the surface. The fight here had been going on for a long time, and it couldn't be helped. Every cultivator was limited to their starting position, so they could only work hard at the nearest shard. It was impossible for them to go to another place just because there were more people here. What if there were more people in another place? Continue to search? They would lose their drive and their Tao heart. In the end, it would be like a bear breaking a stick with no one left. Unless the cultivator couldn't stand steadily on the dragon boat and was shaken off by the main force, he wouldn't be able to withstand the tide of the sea of grass in this space. Lu Xiaoyi didn't reveal anything. He quietly observed every cultivator, hoping to find some clues from their subtle movements to see if there were any signs of abnormalities. Unfortunately, none of the people present could see anything. Maybe the person was hiding very well and was looking for an opportunity, or maybe the person hadn't arrived yet. Time passed slowly. Lu Xiaoyi was very patient. He was very sure that the shard he chose through the vision of the slaughter grass was very suitable. If someone really wanted to sweep through all the shards in this space, they definitely wouldn't miss this place. It didn't matter if he couldn't wait. At most, he wouldn't be able to discover this person. He could just take the slaughter shard in the end. It wasn't a loss. He felt that in the trend of the great path's change, there was a hidden undercurrent that was silently pushing it forward. His realm was limited, and his position was not high enough, but he still had the opportunity to analyze this process from the perspective of an insignificant person. This was not because he was bored, but because he always believed that if a cultivator wanted to achieve something, he could not make any mistakes in Dafa. He had to go with the flow. Where was the momentum? What direction would it take? No one would tell him, because it was possible that no one knew. But he wanted to know because he didn't want to go against the trend. This was the foundation for him to continue walking and survive. One would not be able to go far if they were ignorant. Guessing correctly once did not mean that they would be able to guess correctly a second time or a third time. There would always be that one wrong guess. To an individual, it could be an abyss. In the process of waiting, there were people who couldn't withstand the storm and had no choice but to retreat under the natural and man-made pressure. But at the same time, there were also newcomers like him who joined in. After him, there were 3 more Taoists, 2 monks, and a demon beast. They were also the targets of his attention. His patience did not go to waste. After joining for more than a month, there were finally some interesting changes. Sun Xiaomao quietly joined in the pursuit of the slaughter shard. There were a lot of human cultivators here, and it was very dangerous. But for her, it was not a problem. She was a palace's cat, a member of the cat family. She was born in a faraway planet in the universe. Because of an accident, she came here after learning about the story of the fragrant grass trail. In the fragrant grass trail, she was not the only demon. The great path had collapsed, and every kind of cultivation creature had the right to pursue it. Not only humans, but also demons. At least in theory, humans treated demons fairly. Of course, the premise was that you were strong enough. Sun Xiaomao kept a low profile. This was the nature of a palace's cat. She was lonely, vigilant, and full of distrust toward anything unfamiliar. This allowed her to survive, but she had no friends. The palace's cat did not need friends. Its body was very small. In the world of cultivation, this kind of appearance was more suitable to be a pet than to be alone in the universe. Because it was small, and because it did not have the most obvious appearance of the demon race, it was often the target of bullying when it wandered in the universe. However, in the current situation, it was often the one that did not attract attention. Who would pay attention to a cute long-haired cat? But it also had its advantages. It was good at something. As a cat, its agility was unparalleled in its small size. Even in the sea of grass storm, which was very dangerous for humans, it was not that unacceptable to the palace's cat. As long as it was willing, the slaughter shard would not be able to entangle it. If the sea of grass storm could be increased infinitely, she believed that she would be one of the last few creatures to survive. Unfortunately, the sea of grass storm also had its limits. After all, it was grass, a plant. In terms of destructive power, it was far from being comparable to a sentient creature. Sun Xiaomao did not enter the core area, which was the closest to the fragment. She was very smart. She knew that there was no danger for her to wander around the periphery. No human would deliberately target her. Occasionally, she would just subconsciously attack her. But if she went to a place where she was not supposed to go, she was waiting for her chance. It might be difficult for others to understand. Why did a little long-haired cat like her come here? But only she knew that she was not only here to join the fun, but she was also very confident. The secret was in her supernatural power. It was a power that seemed useless in normal times, the space in her cheek pouch. Many demonic beasts had similar devouring powers. Their belly pouches were very large, and they could swallow food that was even bigger than them. There was a certain amount of space in their pouches. The palace's cat also had such a power, but it was not in their belly pouches. It was in their cheek pouches, just like how a squirrel's mouth could hold a surprising amount of fruit. Its cheek pouch was also a space supernatural power. But what was different from other demonic beasts was that the space in the cheek pouch was not big, but the mysterious control of the space in the cheek pouch was extraordinary. Not only could it store food, but it could also store some strange things, such as the mysterious shard of Tao. In fact, the cheek pouch in its mouth had already stored 3 slaughter shards, but it still wanted to store one more. It was not that it was greedy. Since it had cultivated to such a level, it at least had a sense of propriety. The reason it still wanted to do this was that it was not clear how many slaughter shards were enough for what it wanted to do. 3 slaughter shards did not seem to be enough. If it took too many, it might arouse the suspicion of human cultivators. It would take one more, and it would leave this place. To it, humans were full of uncertainty. Chapter 1147. Sun Xiaomiao was very patient. This was her nature. When she was a mortal beast, the palace's cat was small, and its speed was not the best among the felines. Its hunting habit was to wait patiently, hide, and then pounce on its prey. If she could do it when she was a mortal beast, why couldn't she do it when she was a Yuanying? The palace's cat also paid special attention to the human cultivators around it. Other than those who were particularly strong among humans, there were also those who were wandering around the periphery of the fragment. As a demonic beast, it was very clear that what it was doing now would incur the hatred of humans. Once its secret was discovered, no matter how fast it was or how agile it would definitely be hunted down and killed. Therefore, it had to be very careful. After waiting for more than 10 days, the opportunity came quietly. Obviously, not all cultivators approved of this kind of procrastination. There were always those who were impatient and wanted to end the battle quickly, once and for all. After holding back for a long time and brewing up a few times, the cultivators in the outer circle began to attack with tacit understanding. They did not have a very clear purpose. They just wanted to disrupt the current stable rhythm and make the scene more chaotic. The sea of grass became wilder and the cultivators more impulsive. Only when the situation was chaotic could they fish in troubled waters. More than 10 cultivators in the periphery tacitly rushed in. The waves of spells triggered the response of the sea of grass. Even the fragment was unstable due to the impact. Their figures swayed, and their attacks were aimless. Almost everyone fell into a short period of great pressure at the same time. Although the 7 or 8 cultivators in the core area were relatively strong, no one could control the situation in such a sudden change. More than 20 figures flew up and down in the space near the fragment. Everyone wanted to get closer to it and see if they could buy time to fuse with the fragment in a short period of time. Among the figures, there were the Taoist's restrictive spell, the monk's Vajra's glaring eyes, the flying swords, and the body cultivator's Dharma form. It was a mess. In an instant, several people were injured. At least this attack achieved one goal, which was to reduce the number of cultivators who were fighting for the fragment. It was in such chaos that a cultivator shouted, "Where is the fragment? Where did it go? Which bastard did it?" The crowd spread out and searched carefully. Indeed, the massacre fragment that had always been there disappeared in the chaos. Of course, it couldn't have flown to another place, so someone must have taken advantage of the chaos to make a move. But in the chaos, more than 20 people were all suspects, and there was no evidence, so how could they differentiate? In fact, this was also the actual situation of many fragment fights. There was no way to take it seriously, and there was no time to investigate. The most important thing was to hurry to the next fragment fight. Thus, they dispersed in a hubbub. Sun Xiaomiao was also mixed in with the crowd of cultivators. She chose a direction and flew away. She was proud of herself. She was an average-looking and mediocre palace's cat, but she was able to win against so many powerful cultivators. This in itself was a kind of affirmation. Now that he had achieved his goal, he shouldn't linger any longer. It knew very well in its heart that no matter how many times it tried, the risk of being discovered was getting higher and higher. It was time to leave. Demonic beasts had the intuition of demonic beasts towards the fragrant grass trail. In this aspect, they were much stronger than humans, so she actually knew the general direction of return. There was no need for her to go in circles in this annoying sea of grass. More than 20 people were flying in different directions. Soon, there were no other cultivators around Sun Xiaomiao. This made her heart, which had been hanging in the air, gradually calm down. Now that no one had discovered her, it meant that no one would ever come after her. She was safe. She flew away like an arrow, eager to return home. She left the center of the sea of grass, which also meant that she had left the area where the massacre fragments were more concentrated. The further she went, the less likely the fragments would appear. This was because the core principle of the massacre fragment trajectory was to move towards the deeper parts of the sea of grass, where the battle was more intense. Wherever the sea of grass was more violent and where the battle was more chaotic, it would go there. At this point, she was basically safe. In another 2 to 3 months, she would fly out of the fragrant grass trail and return to the normal void of the universe. Who would pay attention to a slippery palace's cat? When she finally felt safe, danger suddenly came. A graceful Taoist suddenly appeared and blocked her path. Fellow Taoist, why are you leaving in such a hurry? I have a pot of celestial wine and would like to invite you to drink it together. I wonder if you could give me some face? As soon as the Taoist said that, Sun Xiaomiao knew that something was wrong. What pot of celestial wine? It was just an excuse for the human cultivator to stop her. It was just like how in the world of demonic beasts, this mountain was opened by me. It had the same meaning. Although she didn't know where she had exposed herself, this Taoist was also one of the more than 20 human cultivators who had surrounded the fragment. The matter was obvious. The Taoist had already seen through her trick, but he didn't say anything. He had been quietly following her until there was no one else around. In fact, he wanted to take all the spoils for himself. What she wasn't sure about was how much this Taoist knew. In theory, whether it was a human cultivator or a demonic beast, it was impossible for them to spit out the great Tao fragment after they had obtained it. This was because their so-called absorption was actually integration. They had integrated it into their sea of consciousness. Even if you killed them, they wouldn't be able to spit it out. However, this Taoist had been following her all the way, as if he knew that she could spit it out. This was a little strange. Did the Taoist only know that she had hidden a fragment? Or several? That was the key to her survival. I'm not good at drinking wine. Please don't blame me. Sun Xiaomiao could only pretend to be confused for now. The Taoist was still enthusiastic. You don't drink wine? Okay, I have delicacies from all walks of life here. There are things that fly in the sky, things that run on the ground, and things that swim in the water. I have everything that Brother Monkey wants to eat here. I feel like old friends with Brother Monkey at first sight. We should get to know each other better. Sun Xiaomiao was completely speechless. When humans were shameless, demonic beasts like her would never be able to compete with them. She couldn't compete with them in terms of combat power, shamelessness, and hypocrisy. What's the matter, fellow Taoist? If I can do it, I'll do it. However, I have something to do at home, and I'm in a hurry to return. I can't delay it. Please forgive me, fellow Taoist. Sun Xiaomiao had no choice but to take the initiative. She was robbed, yet she still wanted the victim to open her mouth. This was the way of human cultivators. The Taoist laughed. It's fine. We cultivators should be self-disciplined. How can we block people's way of returning? Brother Monkey, just focus on your journey. I'm also going out. Maybe it's on the way. I heard that the palace maces have a unique ability to identify directions. You don't mind if I share some of your glory, do you? Sun Xiaomiao was helpless. She could only focus on flying out. In the meantime, she also secretly accelerated. As a member of the palace maces, she made full use of her agility. Although she was flying out, she flew towards where the sea of grass was the thickest. She wanted to get rid of the Taoist and make him retreat. She knew very well that if she couldn't get rid of the Taoist in a place like the fragrant grass path, it would be even more impossible in the vast void of the universe. Her absolute speed was very limited. At that time, she would really be at the mercy of the Taoist. Chapter 1148. Sun Xiaomiao's thoughts were destined to be futile. He had to admit that even with the palace's cat clan's pride, they could not escape from the most powerful group of human cultivators. This malicious Taoist belonged to the top group. No matter how fast he sped up, twisted, and turned, he stuck to Ji Hao's body like a piece of dog skin plaster, never leaving Ji Hao's side for even an inch. Ji Hao was completely relaxed. Thus, it knew that if it didn't resolve this matter, it wouldn't be able to get rid of this cultivator. This Taoist was very shrewd and ruthless. He knew that if he attacked directly, it might cause him to break down. He had to dispose of the broken pieces in some way. Therefore, he did not use force. He just followed closely and let it collapse under the pressure. For it, the only chance it had was in this sea of grass. Once it left the normal universe, it had no hope at all. He secretly channeled his demonic energy, accumulated his strength, cultivated his supernatural powers, and thought about his methods. When there was still more than a month before he left the fragrant grass trail, he found a place where the sea of grass was raging and stopped. He decided to lay his cards on the table. The palace's cat's hair stood on end as the murderous grass continued to swirl around him. His eyes were no longer filled with fear and hesitation. Instead, they were filled with determination and determination. How about here? I hope fellow Taoists can speak clearly. Whatever fellow Taoist needs, as long as I have it, I won't be stingy. However, if it exceeds my bottom line, I won't hesitate to fight to the death. The Taoist nodded his head, admiring the kitten's shrewdness. But what he wanted was not to let the kitten go, just because it was cute. His name was Tung Chong, and he came from the Heaven's Choice continent. He had been wandering around the fragrant grass trail for the past few years. On one hand, it was for his own massacre shards, and, on the other hand, it was to help the Heaven's Choice cultivators who came along with him. In recent years, things had been going very smoothly. He had obtained his own massacre shards early on, and the Heaven's Choice cultivators had also helped a few of them without revealing anything. It was a pity that he was unlucky. He had heard that there were impermanence shards appearing in the fragrant grass trail, but he had not encountered any. During the battle between more than 20 people fighting for the fragment, one of them was an old acquaintance of Heaven's Choice. Thus, he hid in the crowd and began to think about how he could help his old acquaintance. There were too many people, so there was no way to fight them head-on. They could only wait for an opportunity. He believed that he would definitely succeed. With his strength, he had wandered around the fragrant grass trail for many years, but he had not seen many who could catch his eye. However, no matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to decide among more than 20 people. These were two different things. His wait was fruitless. It wasn't that he wasn't patient enough, but that the change was too sudden. Once, a cultivator on the periphery went crazy. In his opinion, it was impossible to achieve anything other than creating some chaos in a chaotic battle. However, he inexplicably lost his fragment. This made him, who had always prided himself on being in control of the entire situation, feel extremely humiliated. However, he was born in a noble orthodoxy, the exact opposite of Shaoyuan. He was born in one of the most powerful countries of Heaven's Choice and was especially proficient in perception. He also had the support of treasures, which allowed him to lock onto the location of the fragment. He was very sure that the fragment had not been absorbed by anyone. Instead, someone had used some unknown method to hide it and was preparing to secretly take it away. At that time, the battlefield was chaotic and there were many people. He was not sure who had taken the fragment away, but after everyone had scattered and left, he followed the direction of the treasure and followed it all the way here. In the end, he found out that it was a small palace's cat who was behind all this. However, he wasn't sure. How did this thing take away the slaughter fragment? If he directly snatched it away, would it be futile? Would he not be able to get it even if he killed the palace's cat? This was very common in the cultivation world. Just like a cultivator's storage ring, it had its own protective function. Outsiders could not easily obtain it. Furthermore, he also suspected that this was the first fragment that the palace's cat had stolen. The first one? Impossible. Every thief would say that it was their first time committing a crime when they were caught. Considering that the speed at which the fragments of the great Tao near the Sea of Grass were fused was unexpectedly fast, he speculated that this little guy had probably stolen many of them. It was not easy to snatch them because there was no way to control the changes that would occur after the death of the host. If it was a human cultivator, objects of the great Tao, such as the great Tao fragment, would definitely seep out after the death of the host. He had already fused one fragment, so there was no way he could fuse a second one. Thus, the fragments would return to the Sea of Grass and be fought over by the other cultivators. However, demonic beasts were different. They were not good at using objects, so they must have used supernatural powers. Then, how could he take this little guy away? Bring it to the Heaven's Choice continent and use whatever means he could to make it obediently spit it out and give it to his fellow disciples? Wouldn't that be a great achievement? This was also the reason why he had been speaking nicely and did not dare to use force. However, following him like this would definitely arouse the little guy's suspicions. Just like this showdown, it was unavoidable. On the path of cultivation, having someone to help you and walking alone are two different things. The higher you go, the more this is the case. If there's no one to guide you, no one to rely on, and no huge force to support you, to most cultivators, there is a high probability that you will end up as a pile of bones. I'm not exaggerating, am I? Seeing the palace's cat nodding warily, Tung Chong continued to persuade him. You might think that there are also great demons who become monarchs and immortals who also cultivate alone. However, what I want to tell you is that this refers to the immemorial sacred beasts, not you guys who are at the bottom of the hierarchy. Thus, it is very important to find a place to rely on. Unfortunately, you demonic beasts do not have a powerful force and have no system. You will not be able to find a place where everyone is of the same race and can help each other. In the universe, there is only one species that can do this: humans. You can get everything you lack from humans: guidance on your path, profound techniques, endless resources, and many fellow disciples. You don't have to worry about being bullied because you have a powerful force behind you. These are all very close to you now. The palace's cat was not stupid. Do you mean that I should express my gratitude? Tung Chong sneered. There is no such thing as free cultivation. Have you ever seen a pie fall from the sky? You will have hundreds or thousands of years of convenience, guidance at any time, endless resources, and eternal support from your fellow disciples. With this guarantee for the rest of your life, Brother Palace's cat only has to work on the fragrant grass trail for a year to get all this. Don't you think it's worth it? Besides, it's not like you'll never be able to get something even if you give it away. Since you still have the ability, you'll have plenty of time to continue using it in the future. A momentary loss in exchange for a beautiful future. What deal could be more appropriate than this? The more Ting Chong spoke, the more tempted he became. He did not know what the palace's cat was like, but if this little guy had such an ability, that would be completely useful in the future when more than 30 great paths collapsed. With it, the fragments could be taken instantly. What could be more powerful than this? Chapter 1149. But the palace's cat remained unmoved. Using the simple way of thinking of monsters, what you're saying is nothing more than a pie in the sky in exchange for something real. How do I know what you're saying is true? How big is your influence? How can you guarantee my safety for the rest of my life? Even if you're sincere, what about your sect? At the end of the day, you're nothing but a Yuaniing. You can't make the final decision. Tung Chong knew that it was difficult to persuade a beast, but he had to do it. He had his reasons. Not only the things in the palace's cat's cat divine ability, but also the palace's cat itself. Therefore, he didn't mind telling the truth. After all, the palace's cat couldn't escape his control. My name is Tung Chong. I'm from the Heaven's Choice continent. Yes, it's the so-called negative space that you speak of. In terms of status, the positive space and the negative space are equal. How can there be a difference in status? My country is called Shuang Country, one of the strongest countries in the Heaven's Choice continent. There are more than 10 half-immortals, hundreds of perfected cultivators, and countless yuanying. Tell me, do you think we can protect you? In terms of status and strength, we're much more reliable than those so-called upper sects of the universe. You have such extraordinary abilities. Why aren't you valued? My words carry little weight, so I can't promise you anything. But if you really go to the Heaven's Choice continent, your treatment will only be better than what I've said, not worse. The palace's cat's heart skipped a beat. In fact, he had been a little tempted at first. It wasn't because of the so-called benefits. As a monster, he was a loner by nature. He didn't care about guidance or resources. Instead, he was thinking of giving the fragment to this Taoist and risking his life to search for more. It was a last resort, but now, it seemed that the Taoist's intentions weren't just about the fragment, but also about itself. He was treating it as a treasure-hunting beast, which was something that it couldn't tolerate since it was used to being free, from a wild cat to a house cat, to be treated like a pet, tossed a piece of meat when it was happy, and kicked when it was unhappy. How was that different from death? It was also at this moment that Sun Xiaomao steeled her heart. She knew that the final moments of her life were coming. But before that, it still wanted to use some things to move the Taoist, because it had heard that some humans were actually very emotional. They would change their minds because of some small things that were not worth mentioning. Fellow Taoist Ting Chong, can I tell you my story? Ting Chong tried his best to smile gently, so as not to put pressure on the little guy. Of course, we have plenty of time. Sun Xiaomiao looked at him sincerely. This little demon comes from a faraway beast planet. It's very small, so small that humans might not even be used to living here. We all call it Meow Star. The most common species living on Meow planet is the cat race. There are many species, such as Pallas's cat, lynx, ocelot, leopard cat, lynx, serval cat, caracal cat, and so on. Meow planet is our paradise, isolated from the rest of the world and free. A long, long time ago, human cultivators came to Meow planet and found countless beautiful cat breeds there. So, some busybodies took them and kept them as pets. Gradually, Meow planet became famous in the cultivation world of the nearby universe. Everyone was proud to be able to keep a purebred cat from Meow planet. To humans, this is a lot of fun, but to Meow planet, it's a disaster. Because no matter how many cats there are on Meow planet, they can't outnumber the surrounding human cultivators. Tung Chong was a little embarrassed, but he still expressed his sympathy out of politeness. Not every cultivator has such a hobby. At least, we, the Heaven's Chosen cultivators, don't. We won't keep an entire species as pets. The palace's cat continued. The most unbearable thing for cats is that in order to cultivate more beautiful, gentler, and more intimate cat breeds, some so-called spirit beast masters began to transform the cat population on Meow planet. Through various methods, such as breeding, elixirs, bloodline fusion. This method caused profound changes to the cat breeds on Meow planet. After 10,000 years, the number of purebred cats became fewer and fewer. The so-called house cats that were cultivated were everywhere. They didn't even have the ability to survive on their own. If they couldn't be taken away as pets, they would starve to death. They had lost the ability to evolve in nature. Later, human cultivators invented a way to cultivate cat breeds in their own world. The cats cultivated in this way were more intimate with humans and had almost completely lost their wild nature. But humans liked it. Slowly, no one was willing to come to Meow planet to take away the poor, crippled cats. The price was too high and the time was too long. Plus, humans are a race that likes the new and hates the old. They could cultivate cat breeds on the spot. With the popularity of other types of pets, slowly, no one remembered Meow planet. Tung Chong laughed dryly. This is indeed a bad habit of humans. But they eventually changed, didn't they? They don't go to Meow Planet anymore, right? Sun Xiaomiao said word by word, yes. Humans finally changed, just like they did every time. They can boast about their morals again. They can go up another level in terms of their state of mind. They can comfort themselves again in terms of emotional cause and effect. But what about the cats on Meow Planet? Sun Xiaomiao's face was a little ferocious. What about us cats? We were played by humans just like that, and no one cared? Their habits have changed. They're no longer the pure cat breeds of the past. They have learned how to be spoiled. They have learned how to make people happy. They have learned how to please people. But they have forgotten how to hunt, how to survive, how to fight against nature. We originally thought that after a period of time, maybe hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, us cats with purer and more ancient bloodlines would be able to reverse this trend. But what disappointed us was that the number of ancient cats was really too small. It was so small that even if we kept breeding, we couldn't change the trend of domestic cats that had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. On the contrary, our pure bloodline was constantly diluted. This is the sin that humans have done to Meow Planet in terms of genetics. If it continues like this, when the last batch of pure-blooded cats grow old and die, Meow Planet will completely become the world of domestic cats, and we will forever lose the ability to evolve and cultivate. Tell me, should we be grateful to humans? Tung Chong coughed lightly. He was a little angry in his heart. It was just a small inheritance of the demon race. What was there to talk about? Were there any lack of such cases in the universe? It happened every year, and only the cat race couldn't stand it, but he still tried to restrain himself. It can't be that bad, right? You pure-blooded ancient breeds can also pass on the inheritance to each other, and then wait for changes to happen and slowly grow stronger. Sun Xiaomiao shouted angrily. As a human, don't you know what inbreeding is? Chapter 1150. Tung Chong frowned. He realized the problem. Was he being too friendly to this palace's cat? So friendly that it didn't even know who he was? Who was the chopping block? Who was the rabbit meat? Watch your words. The actions of the humans around the Meow Planet didn't necessarily mean that everyone was the same. I can guarantee that the chosen ones are not like that. Sun Xiaomao raised her head stubbornly. No, the chosen ones are the same. It's just in a different way. In the past, humans liked us because they could treat us as pets. You're pretending to help me now because you've taken a fancy to my ability. What's the difference? There's no difference at all. It's just to satisfy the desires of you humans. Did I say anything wrong? Tung Chong was no longer frowning. He raised his eyebrows, but his tone was calm. Fine, since you've asked, I'll let you say as much as you want. Say it. What else are you unhappy about? Say it, and we'll have the best way to resolve it. Sun Xiaomao didn't care anymore. This was the nature of demonic beasts. When it touched the deepest pain in its heart, nothing else mattered. No one cares about us. We can take care of ourselves, can't we? Turning into a house cat made us lose our wild nature, so we have to find a way to get it back. The ancient nature of freedom that's deeply rooted in our blood. We need the slaughter shards. We need to awaken the beastly nature of the cats. This is the only way we can think of. So I came here. As the only Yuaniing on Meow Planet, I have the responsibility to help restore the ancient bloodline of our race. Yes, I stole a few shards, and I won't hide it from you. There's a total of 4 shards because I'm worried that it won't be enough. But I won't give you these shards, because this is what Meow Planet needs. To you, the shards are just a checkpoint in the process of enlightenment. There's no slaughter, but there are other things. If you can't get it here, you can get it elsewhere. But to Meow Planet, this is life and death. It's the future. It's everything. Wait for me to send the shards back. Spread them to Meow Planet. When I'm done, you can name a place and I'll go find you. Then, you can order me around. Tung Chong narrowed his eyes. What if I'm not willing? What if I want you to come with me now? Sun Xiaomiao said resolutely. If you leave now, the only thing you can take away is my corpse. Tung Chong said meaningfully. He had finally realized that it was impossible to take the lightning's cat away peacefully. This was not something that could be bribed. When demonic beasts truly realized their responsibility to their species, they would not turn back even if it meant death. In this aspect, they were much more resolute than humans. In a fundamental sense, when a demonic beast was stubborn, its persistence was even stronger than a human's faith. Therefore, there was no need for him to waste his breath trying to take away a demonic beast. Even though he wasn't from the beast-tamer Tao lineage, the orthodox Taoism didn't lack such methods. For example, shoplifting. Of course, this should be called conveniently leading the monkey. The name sounded unsophisticated, but it was a secret method that the orthodox Taoist sects used to deal with disobedient demonic beasts. Among the major powers, there would always be spirit beasts and demonic beasts reared by the sects that had a change in temperament due to various reasons, causing them to escape and wreak havoc in the mortal world. In such a situation, it would be a waste to kill them, wasting so much effort to nurture them. But if they didn't kill them, they wouldn't be able to control them. Therefore, they came up with this secret technique, conveniently leading the sheep. Conveniently leading the sheep wasn't something that could be casually used. Otherwise, wouldn't all the demonic beasts in the universe be wiped out by the Taoists? There was a precondition to using this secret technique, and that was to find out the obsession in the demonic beast's heart. For spirit beasts and demonic beasts reared by the sects, this was a simple task. After all, they had been reared for so many years. But for wild demonic beasts, there was nothing they could do. This was because even you didn't know what the demonic beast's obsession was. Was it to become a human? Was it to eat? Or was it to become a divine beast? Therefore, from the very beginning, Tung Chong had purposely led the lightning's cat into a dish. He forced the demonic beast to speak the truth from the bottom of his heart. If they could reach a deal, needless to say, everyone would be happy. But if they couldn't, with this invisible thread and a little bit of the secret technique, the lightning's cat would have to follow him even if it didn't want to. It still didn't have the ability to control its own body. When it came to scheming, even the most cunning demonic beasts were no match for humans. Sun Xiaomiao thought that her words would be able to move the Taoist, but in the end, she went for wool and came home shorn. Instead, she had fallen into a trap. The Taoist turned around and left. Sun Xiaomiao felt that she couldn't control herself and followed behind him. She had lost all control of her demonic qi, spirit, blood, body, everything. She felt so helpless and lonely. It was so bitter that she couldn't even shed tears. Her tear ducts were no longer under her control. Only her brain was still working. She could still see, hear, and think. But the decision she made couldn't be transmitted to a medium that could be carried out. She was sad, but she couldn't feel pain. Because her heart wasn't under her control, she had the determination to die, but she couldn't find the right way to do it. She regretted. She regretted that she had underestimated the shamelessness of humans. She shouldn't have said anything more. It was only a battle, so why waste words? Meow Star, she would never be able to see it again, because it would be brought to another space, the antimatter space. It would be very difficult for it to have a chance to return. A Yuaning was enough to make it helpless. When it really arrived at the Heaven's Choice continent, under the means of a monarch or half-immortal, what good could it do? Perhaps becoming a treasure-hunting monkey was the best outcome for it. It had to be restrained by someone and placed in a spirit beast bag that couldn't see the light of day. Freedom was getting further and further away from it, and its heart was dead. Heaven's Way was so wonderful. When it successfully stole the 4 slaughter shards, it felt that the world was so beautiful. Then, Heaven's Way gave it a slap in the face, pulling it back from its beautiful imagination to the cruel reality. And when it thought that it would live on as a spirit beast puppet for the rest of its life, and even lose the will to resist, Heaven's Way smiled at it again. Of course, Heaven's Way was shameless, but humans were. An ordinary-looking Taoist mysteriously appeared in front of the man, and the beast with a smile on his face. "Fellow Taoist, why did you leave in such a hurry? I have a pot of immortal wine, and would like to invite fellow Taoists to drink with me. I wonder if you can give me some face." Sun Xiaomiao, felt that these words were very familiar. Then, Tung Chang's impatient voice sounded. This poor Taoist is not good at drinking wine. Fellow Taoist, please help yourself. The universe is dangerous. Don't talk carelessly. Be careful of trouble from the mouth. That unfamiliar Taoist smiled even more brilliantly, so rotten that one could see his teeth and not his eyes. Don't drink wine? Okay, this poor Taoist has delicacies from all walks of life flying in the sky, running on the ground, swimming in the water, whatever fellow Taoist wants to eat. I have it here. Fellow Taoist, and I feel like old friends at first sight. Let's get closer. Sun Xiaomiao finally remembered. Wasn't this what Heaven's choice Taoist Tung Chong said to her just now? These humans, when they were hypocritical, they were all the same. Chapter 11:51. P.S. Are there any more monthly votes? If not, I'll stop updating after the holidays. Sun Xiaomiao's reaction was quick. Just from the two identical sentences, she could at least prove that this Taoist had been spying on them in the dark all this while. What did this mean? To be able to do this within the range of their senses, this meant that this person was very powerful. At least in terms of stealth, he was not only above Sun Xiaomiao, but also above this terrifying Tung Chong. This meant that there was a change. Sun Xiaomiao's mind started to work quickly. She looked at this Taoist's face carefully and realized that he was one of the 20 people who fought for the fragment back then. It could not help but blame itself. It turned out that there were loopholes everywhere in what it thought was a flawless plan. It could never do that again in the future. If Sun Xiaomiao could think of this, how could Ting Chong not think of it? The moment this Taoist spoke, he immediately realized what was going on. If it were a normal cultivator, he wouldn't have bothered to talk to them. He would have killed them long ago. The only reason he was willing to talk now was because he didn't know this guy's background. This was a swordsman, a very troublesome orthodoxy. He definitely didn't use his full strength during the fight for the fragment. Just like him, he had other motives. More importantly, this guy was hiding in the dark and observing his every move. He even knew what they were talking about. How'd he do it? He couldn't help but think about this terrifying question. He couldn't be rash. He warned himself. Wasn't he just pretending to be a hypocrite, pretending to be fun and showing off? All right, then let's continue playing like this. Previously, the palace's cat couldn't shake him off. Now that it was his turn to run, he wanted to see if this swordsman could catch up to him. This wasn't the normal void of the universe. A swordsman was invincible in the universe if he ran in a straight line. In such a complicated environment like the sea of grass, speed wasn't the only solution. Why did you stop me, fellow cultivator? Tell me, if I can help, I'll definitely help. The stranger waved his hand and said, It's nothing, it's nothing. As cultivators, we should be self-disciplined. How can we block the path of others and prevent them from returning? Fellow cultivator, you can just focus on your journey. I'm going out too. Maybe it's on the way. I heard that Dharma cultivators have a unique ability to identify directions. You don't mind if I bask in your glory, do you? Hearing the swordsman imitating his words, Tung Chong was infuriated. However, Sun Xiaomiao was overjoyed. A wicked person would be dealt with by another wicked person. Humans still had to be bullied by humans. He wanted to see which of these two villains was more evil. Tung Chong did not say much. Even though he was confident in his own strength, this swordsman was a little strange. More importantly, he had a palace's cat with him, so he had to be careful when fighting with him. It was not that he was afraid of the swordsman. In the world of cultivators, there were many examples of people who were good at certain things, but bad at other things. He had a very impressive technique called inverse the universe. It was a spatial technique, and it was an extremely rare two-way spatial technique. It allowed him to switch his position with his opponents and increase the distance between them. It was originally a special technique in battle, but it was very suitable to be used in this situation. If it was in the void of the normal universe, inverse the universe would not be able to separate the two of them and cause them to lose each other's sense of location. However, this was the sea of grass. A cultivator's senses were not even 1/100th of the normal universe. Once inverse the universe was used, his opponent would not be able to guess his direction. Even if he could hide, there were countless directions in the three-dimensional space. Where could he find him? The only weakness of inverse the universe was that it took a long time to activate. In a real battle, it needed time to prepare. However, since this guy was so arrogant, he would let him suffer a little. Sun Xiaomao felt herself shuttling through the sea of grass. Her speed was even faster than the palace's cat, which was famous for its speed. She finally understood that the instincts of demonic beasts were superior to that of normal human cultivators. However, compared to the unconventional human cultivators, it was hopeless. She could also see that even though Tung Chong was moving at such an astonishing speed, the smiling cultivator behind him did not move a single step. He was like a fish swimming in the sea of grass. Didn't all swordsmen ride swords? How could this person be able to move so fast without riding a sword? Sun Xiaomao had countless questions. She realized that it was a mistake for her to get involved in the human world. In front of these top experts, she was like a baby even though she had lived for a longer time. While she was sighing, her vision suddenly blurred. Light and shadow intertwined. She knew that Tung Chong had used a spatial technique. When she returned to normal, she was no longer in the same place. Instead, she was in a foreign sea of grass. Tung Chong smiled conceitedly. Do you know what I used just now? Inverse the universe. In layman's terms, it resets the spatial position of both the enemy and myself. This can be used in battle to break away from the boundary, to occupy an advantageous attacking position, and so on. When used here, it can cause both parties to be separated in an instant. The distance between the two parties is greater than the spiritual sense distance in the sea of grass. He doesn't know my direction. He doesn't even know his own direction. How can he chase after me? There are many more secret techniques like this in my sect. There are so many that you can't even imagine. If you join us, you can learn all of this. Sun Xiaomao remained silent. This secret technique was indeed powerful. It could move people without making a sound, especially when used in such a special environment. After using it, there was no way to detect the other party's position. Of course, there was no way to chase after him. She was a little resentful. Humans were all like this. Since you've already stopped someone, you should just do it. Why did you have to talk about such trivial things? Pretending to be a big wolf and acting mysterious? In the end, now that you've lost track of your target, you don't even have a direction. No matter how good you are at concealment, what's the use? Tung Chong changed directions twice and continued to fly outwards. At the same time, he opened his spiritual sense to the maximum, vigilant of all movements around him. After a moment, nothing strange happened. He also didn't feel anyone chasing after him. Only then did he relax slightly. It was also at this time that a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. It was a big, smiling face that seemed harmless to humans and animals. What a coincidence! You and I are fated. It's really a small world. Fellow Taoist, why did you leave in such a hurry? I have a pot of immortal wine and would like to invite fellow Taoists to drink with me. I wonder if you can give me some face? Tung Chong's face changed. He lowered his head and sped away. At the same time, he was thinking carefully. Was there a mistake with inverse the universe? Was it really a coincidence? Or did this person have some other miraculous skill? Although the bad feeling in his heart was getting heavier and heavier, he still wanted to try again. Behind him, Sun Xiaomao was very happy. All the awkwardness that had once troubled her was now being repaid by the evil Tao. This was really karma. This feeling of being defeated was very sullen, but seeing someone else being defeated was also very satisfying. Chapter 1152. P.S. Are there any more monthly votes? If not, I'll stop updating after the holidays. Taoist Ting Chong repeated the same trick and used inverse the universe again. This time, he used all his strength, wishing that he could change the direction of the skill and increase the distance to the limit of the secret skill. Then, after a moment, the big face in front of him was still smiling. Why did you leave in such a hurry? I have a jug of immortal wine and would like to invite you to drink with me. Would you give me some face? There was no need to try anymore. This person was a master of both movement and escape. He was inseparable. Just this move alone showed that he was stronger than him. Tung Chong was much more decisive than Sun Xiaomiao. He knew that with his swordsman's unparalleled movement and pursuit skills, if they really went to the normal universe, he would not be able to outrun him. Only here, within the range of the grass storm, could the swordsman's abilities be restricted to the greatest extent. Therefore, if he wanted to fall out, he could not delay any longer. In fact, his mentality was exactly the same as Sun Xiaomiao's when she decided to show her cards. He stared at the swordsman and put Sun Xiaomiao far away. "Why are you in such a hurry? What do you want?" Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. "Whatever you want, I will do. Let's not beat around the bush. Don't try to shirk away with those **T reasons." Tung Chong was furious. "I was the one who captured the palace's cat. In the cultivation world, there's always the principle of first come, first served." Lu Xiaoyi did not care. What principle? The principle of the cultivation world is that whoever has the biggest fist has the final say. To me, if I have my eyes on something, it's mine. You were the one who captured the palace's cat. That's right. But if I capture you again, won't it all be mine? Tung Chong did not say anything else. For thousands of years, the swordsman had always been the same. There was no precedent for him to compromise. With a flip of his hand, several treasured weapons flew out. Before he could take them out, he was greeted by countless sword rays. It was extremely difficult to make the first move against the swordsman, but he was already prepared for this. The dichroic mirror was his trump card against the flying sword. There was nothing to be reluctant about, and he wouldn't use it at the very last moment. To a true combat expert, it was foolish to imagine how a battle would progress. Especially against the orthodoxy like the swordsman, fighting with all their might was the right thing to do. He did not expect to face the swordsman when he came to the fragrant grass trail. It was just one of his daily preparations. The moment he used the spectroscopic mirror, the sword lights flickered. They were all deflected by some kind of mysterious energy. The dichroic mirror swayed left and right, and the flying swords also swayed left and right, but there was an empty space in the middle, and Tung Chong was in it, unharmed. The stupidest way to deal with a swordsman was to use all sorts of physical defenses. Regardless of the form, the moment it landed on the ground, it would be at a disadvantage. What kind of physical defense could deal with the omnipresent and overwhelming flying swords? The only way to deal with the flying swords was to use the void as the real thing. This was the same method as the Hongguang monk from the Taiga Temple. One could use the void as the real thing, but it was impossible to use the void to break the real thing. Therefore, Tung Chong's treasured weapons took turns to form the 5 elements. Metal spears with thorns, water dragons, fire chains, earth mountains, and so on. They rotated according to the 5 elements, changing constantly and showing his deep foundation in the 5 elements. Lu Xiaoyi countered with a river of sword aura. But among the 200,000 sword lights, the 5 elemental treasured weapons clashed with the river of sword aura. It was a competition of deep understanding of the 5 elements. In the rotation of the 5 elements, whoever couldn't keep up with the rhythm would be at a disadvantage and would be forced to passively endure. This was a head-on confrontation. Because of the dichroic mirror, Lu Xiaoyi's flying swords couldn't do anything, and thus, there was no point in controlling them. Without any threat, what was the use of controlling the flying swords? Tung Chong was also very surprised. This swordsman's foundation in the 5 elements was not weaker than his. When he used the 5 elemental treasured weapons at the same time, very few people could withstand it. Most people would use other methods to resist, and then lose their rhythm in the rotation of the 5 elements. In a battle like this, if both sides used the same Tao, it was not easy to retreat, unless you had a deeper understanding of the Tao. Otherwise, if you retreated, you would lose your momentum, initiative, and confidence. What would you use to fight the enemy? Of course, Tung Chong wouldn't retreat, because the Tao of the five elements was the Tao that he had the deepest understanding of. It was also the first choice of most disciples from famous sections. With the five elements in hand, one would have the ability to cultivate. All the changes and spells were within it, and all the Tao of attack and defense followed its principles. He didn't believe that a swordsman, a mid-stage Yuanian cultivator, would have a deeper understanding of the Tao of the five elements than him. Furthermore, he had other methods hidden within. The two of them were at loggerheads. Both of them were proud people, and neither of them was willing to give up. In an instant, the surrounding sea of grass showed signs of the five elements. This was a situation that would only appear when the Tao of the five elements had evolved to a deeper level. Tung Chong was preparing his killer move. He was very clear that the swordsman's final struggle before his death might not be something that the spectral reflection mirror could separate. The final struggle of the swordsman would definitely have some kind of mysterious power. This was the common characteristic of all cultivators. He had to lay the groundwork carefully. For example, he secretly gave up on controlling Sun Xiaomiao. He didn't really give up on this prey, but temporarily. When he was leading the palace's cat, he had already placed a hidden mark on it. No matter where it ran, it wouldn't be able to escape. The other thing was inverse the universe. This was a countermeasure to the swordsman when he was fighting for his life. Of course, this time, he couldn't switch too far away. If it was too far away, he wouldn't be able to reach it. He just needed to keep it within his divine sense, and it wouldn't affect his combination of Tao attacks. There were also a few backup treasure weapons ready. Everything was ready, except for one crucial thing. Other people would usually choose to delay when dealing with the swordsman, but he wouldn't do that. He was worried that the swordsman wouldn't fight him head-on. If he continued to harass him, it would be very troublesome. With the swordsman's ability in flight, if he were to go to the normal universe and play the most shameless game of the swordsman, Tung Chong really didn't have any suitable countermeasures. The cornerstone of all this was the spectral reflection mirror's ability to deflect the internal sword's sword light. Fortunately, this guy was using an internal sword and not an external sword. But even if it was an external sword, it wouldn't be able to deflect the sword light to such an extent, right? The five elements, Tao realms of both sides, were in full contact. Tung Chong suddenly changed his realm, changing the five elements into yin and yang. The sudden change obviously affected the swordsman's Tao realm. In an instant, the Tao realm changed back to the five elements, then back to yin and yang. 3 consecutive changes were completed in the span of 2 breaths. Finally, a loophole appeared in the swordsman's Tao realm. The swordsman's reaction was very fast. He was filled with the rudeness of a sword-vain gambler. His figure flickered, and in the next moment, he appeared beside Tung Chong with his sword in hand. Tung Chong laughed coldly. He knew that this would happen. The spectral reflection mirror could deflect sword light, but it couldn't deflect physical objects, especially against a swordsman. Inverse the universe. Spatial position reversal. The swordsman's approach was futile. Tung Chong controlled the 5 artifacts to continue attacking. The Tao realm rapidly switched between the 5 elements and yin and yang. At the same time, the 200,000 sword lights in the sky converged into a single sword and slashed down. He wanted to rely on the might of the sword to prevent the spectral reflection mirror from moving. This was also within Tung Chong's expectations. How could he not know about the swordsman's so-called strongest attack? He shook the spectral reflection mirror and activated the second layer of the mirror, Alcade. This was a secret technique used to deal with single sword light. It had never failed before, but with a shake of the Alcade, the converged flying sword didn't move at all. It slashed down as fast as lightning. Tung Chong immediately realized that he had made a huge mistake. This wasn't a sword light, but a real sword. This person wasn't using an internal sword either, but an external sword. In a moment of desperation, he could only use the few artifacts he had prepared. But how could they block the incomparably sharp 7 ant? A sword pierced through the heart. Chapter 1153. P.S. Are there any more monthly votes? If not, I won't be able to update at the end of the holidays. Sun Xiaomao was running happily. Ever since Tung Chong released her, she had been running nonstop. In view of the two humans' terrifying movement and sensing ability in the sea of grass, it felt that it would not be able to gain any advantage by running in the sea of grass. Therefore, it might as well not think too much and just run wherever it wanted to go. It was also clear that no matter which of the two villains had the last laugh, they wouldn't give up on pursuing it, unless the two villains perished together. If the sword cultivator was the winner, it would still have a chance of survival if it ran in a straight line. The chance of survival depended on how long the battle lasted. If the Heaven's Choice cultivator was the winner, it would be in more danger because it knew very well that the evil path must have left some kind of identification mark on its body. Unfortunately, it was impossible for a monster to understand the mysterious martial arts that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. She could only run. At the same time, she prayed to the heavenly axiom for the villains to return to the earth. 10 days later, the killer grass was thinning and the sea of grass was weakening. She knew that she had reached the edge of the fragrant grass trail, but she did not feel relaxed at all until a familiar figure appeared in front of her. She felt relieved. Her boots finally landed on the ground. She still could not escape, but the good news was that there was a new villain. I don't drink. I don't eat. What do you want? Only death. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled when he heard the palace's macaque's words. How interesting. Since it's on the way, why don't we have a talk? Sun Xiaomao was very cautious. No, you're talking and you're dragging me away. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Little palace's cat, since I'm not as good as you, what's the difference between me and you? Since there's no difference, why don't we talk? We have nothing to do anyway. Sun Xiaomao kept her mouth shut. She knew that this villain was telling the truth. If she was not strong enough, she would be restrained everywhere. There was nothing she could do. I'm single-eared. Zhou Xian was born in the upper realm. What about you? Sun Xiaomiao didn't want to answer, but she was also a polite person. Evil people were speaking with the respect of ordinary cultivators, so she shouldn't be so scared that she didn't even dare to speak, right? After going through so much, it could be considered to have come to terms with it. In the face of an irresistible force, why should it still live in fear? Sun Xiaomiao, a meow alien. Lu Xiaoyi couldn't help but laugh. Meow alien? Is there a Wang Xing beside you? All right, since it's a talk, let's be honest. I won't be polite, so you don't have to hide anything. If you can convince me, I'll immediately turn around and leave. If you can't convince me, I'll use my fist to suppress you. Is that fair? Sun Xiaomiao hesitated for a long time. What made it difficult was that it definitely couldn't win in terms of fists, but it was even worse when it came to talking. Has there ever been a match for that mouth of the human race in the universe? Lu Xiaoyi didn't care about it and said, the great Tao descending from the heavens is obtained by those who have the ability. This ability, whether you fuse with it or take it with you, is still an ability and should be respected. Do you have any objections to what I've said? Sun Xiaomiao thought for a while and felt that this argument was still acceptable, so she nodded. I agree. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. You see, we also have something in common. Then let's continue our discussion. The great Tao descending from the heavens. Does every cultivator have the qualifications to obtain it? Regardless of whether it's a demon or a human. Regardless of whether it's a man or a woman. Regardless of whether it's a monk or a Taoist priest. Regardless of whether it's the main world or the negative space. Sun Xiaomiao's answer this time was more straightforward. Yes, every living thing has the qualifications to obtain the great Tao. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. You see, we still have a lot in common. If there's someone who has a special ability to collect all the fragments of the great Tao descending from the heavens for one person to enjoy alone, then whether it's morality, common sense, or the consciousness of being a living thing that everyone in the mortal world understands, do you think this kind of behavior is acceptable? Sun Xiaomiao wasn't stupid. She knew that this topic was about her own behavior, but she had a straightforward personality and wouldn't go against her heart in the face of major issues. That's probably not good, Lu Xiaoyi smiled. You see, we have the same values. Doing this is a selfish behavior that only considers your own. Every living thing only needs one fragment of this thing. So what's the point of taking so many? Walking your own path and cutting off other people's paths, that it's natural for others to see you as an enemy. From this point of view, whether it's that Tung Chong just now, or me, or anyone who knows that you're cheating, will chase after you relentlessly, because you violated the basic principle of being a cultivator, cutting off the path of cultivation. So I say, there's no problem for us to chase after you. Don't pretend to be pitiful here and feel wronged. If you feel wronged, then what about those cultivators who worked hard for years but didn't even get a fart? Sun Xiaomiao wanted to refute, but she couldn't find a reason to help her. She could only insist. I did take 4 fragments, but I have a use for them. I'm not being greedy on purpose. I'm cutting off other people's paths for my own sake. Lu Xiaoyi said earnestly. All right, we're starting to disagree. Let's use the example from just now. If someone collects all the fragments and says that I have a use for them, I have friends and family, I have brothers and sisters in the same sect, and everyone who knows me, who wants to curry favor with me, and who wants to curry favor with me, these fragments are all for them. Then do you think that others should understand him? Sun Xiaomiao hung her head dejectedly. No. Lu Xiaoyi was very serious. The conclusion is that you took 1 fragment. This is your right. I came to snatch you. This is my fault. And I have to bear karma, because I cut off your path of cultivation. But you took 4 fragments, so I came to snatch you. This is justice on behalf of the heavens. This is a good deed. There won't be any karma, because you were greedy in the first place. So I'm forcing you now, not to bully the weak and not to target the demon race, but to uphold justice and return the great Tao to the human world. Do you find it hard to accept my words? Sun Xiaomiao was already confused, but she also knew that this evil man who loved to reason had some sense in his words. How come now she, a weakling who was being robbed, became an unpardonable evil? Could this evil man's mouth really invert black and white and call a deer a horse? Without waiting for her to answer, the evil man continued to talk. You have your reasons, and you have your persistence. This is very good. But I also have my reasons, and I have my persistence. I'm not afraid to tell you that I'm not the chosen one, and I won't treat you as a treasure beast that hides fragments. If I kill you, none of the 4 fragments will escape me. Why should I reason with you? Because I want to have a clear conscience. I also understand your thoughts. It's just 4 fragments, not all of them. Why is it so serious? Am I right? Sun Xiaomiao nodded. Now, she felt that she was a bad monkey. What was going on? Chapter 1154. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. After the torment, it was time to say some heartwarming words. I know you want to save the Miao Star Clan so that they can return to their wild nature and have the ability to survive on their own. In this sense, for the survival of the clan, it's not too much to take a few pieces of the great Tao. But I have my doubts about this. Can the pieces of the slaughter help the Miao Star Clan? How can they use the pieces of the slaughter? Are you lying to me? All these need to be confirmed. It's not something you can explain with just a few words. Sun Xiaomao raised her head. I'm not lying. If you don't believe me, you can come with me to the Miao Star Clan. You can see the real appearance of the Miao Star Clan and know the real reason why I did this. Lu Xiaoyi said nonchalantly, cultivation is hard, and there are more hardships than happiness. Since there's a Miao planet in the world, it's a good chance to relax. Sun Xiaomao, let me ask you, how far is the Miao Star Clan from here? Sun Xiaomao impulsively invited this villain to the Miao Star Clan. It was like inviting a wolf into the house. But the words had already been spoken, and there was no way to change them. She could only grit her teeth and say, very far, across 2 universes. I have to travel for 1 or 2 years. I'm afraid I'll delay your business. I'm really worried. Across 2 universes was very far in Sun Xiaomao's words. This could only mean one thing. The palace's cat had never traveled far. Then, how did it know about the fragrant grass trail? a small planet that was stuck in its own small planet, where nobody visited and where the information was blocked, yet it knew about the major events in the dozens of nearby universes, and it could participate in them accurately. It was a little unbelievable, but the palace's cat wouldn't talk about these secrets. Knowing this, Lu Xiaoyi wouldn't ask. He also had a purpose. He was not as noble and righteous as he claimed to be. After communicating with the sea of grass, he found that the number of pieces that fell into the fragrant grass trail was indeed much more than the normal universe void, but it was not so much that he could do whatever he wanted. At that time, according to the range of the sea of grass that he had sensed, after missing the first round of fighting, there were only a dozen slaughter fragments left. In terms of time, the first round of fusion was the fastest because the distance between the slaughter fragments varied, and those who were closer would always be able to get it first. After the first round, the remaining fragments fell into an endless tug-of-war. This was determined by the spatial location. In other words, it wouldn't be a problem for him to snatch away one, but it would be very difficult for him to take more than one. He was very conflicted. He didn't want to personally snatch too many and violate the heavenly taboo, but he also didn't want to miss such a good opportunity. If it was another great Tao fragment, at another time, the distribution of the fragments would be impossible to guess, and he would be lucky to encounter even one. How could he have the opportunity to take more than one and then sell the great Tao? Therefore, when he discovered the palace's cat's little trick, he knew that the opportunity to take advantage of the situation had arrived. He did not even need to bear the consequences of karma. But this required planning, and he couldn't bear to do it to such a small monster. This was because of his personality, and it couldn't be changed. Therefore, he decided to follow the group because he always felt that it was unreliable to rely on slaughter fragments to save the wild nature of a group. This small monster might have believed such a ridiculous thing because it had heard some greedy words. He only needed to expose this rumor, and then it would be natural for him to obtain a few slaughter fragments. Fundamentally, he was no different from Tang Chong. The only difference was the method. He cared more about the feelings of the people involved and didn't want to force them. In his opinion, he could always find a win-win situation where both sides would benefit. This was more in line with his cultivation principles. It was only a few years' time, and he might not even need to use it. He could just treat it as a distraction. He had now broken through the barrier of the 6-inch nascent soul, and his nascent soul was not yet at 7 inches. If he worked harder, he would soon reach the 7-inch threshold. But at this time, he didn't have much spiritual opportunity left. He estimated that he could either collect it from the universe himself or sell the great Tao to earn money. He had to do both. Soon, a man and a beast flew out of the grassy path and into the vast void. Sun Xiaomiao asked cautiously, "Fellow Taoist Dan, you really don't have any other purpose in going to the Miao planet? For example, to find a cute pet?" Lu Xiaoyi sighed. "Xiaomiao, you think too much. You probably want to know whether I will harm the creatures on the Miao planet." "No. For humans, there is no benefit in attacking the Miao planet. Do you have any resources there? Is it suitable for human habitation? Is its strategic position important? There is nothing. What can humans get by slaughtering the Miao planet? Apart from being stained with karma, he would not be able to obtain anything. You have to remember, humans will never do things that don't benefit them. As for cute pets, to be honest, I have no interest in them. Not to mention cute pets, I don't even need fighting beasts. I like small animals, but I don't like to raise them because I'm too lazy. I heard that the Miao planet loses its fur easily. Even its poop stinks, and it's temperamental. I don't have the time to raise such a big guy to serve me all day." Sun Xiaomiao was angry. These shortcomings were true, but they were the shortcomings of ordinary beasts. Cat beasts who practice cultivation did not have these shortcomings. At the very least, their cleanliness was guaranteed. Seeing her unhappy expression, Lu Xiaoyi teased, "For example, you have long fur all over your body. How long has it been since you last bathed?" Sun Xiaomiao found that her vigilance was gradually fading away from this evil man's insanity. It was very strange. This evil man seemed to have a strange charm that always made her relax her vigilance unknowingly. This was the most difficult trip in her life, because there was an evil man with unknown intentions following her, and she didn't know what the result would be. This was also the smoothest trip in her life, because she didn't have to hide, and she didn't have to worry about someone teasing her. It was not that there were no bad guys, but the one beside her was even worse. Because everything went smoothly, the trip went faster than Sun Xiaomiao expected. After a year and a half, Sun Xiaomiao went from being full of worries to being completely relaxed. She knew very well that with her and the Miao planet's value, it was not worth wasting years and going through so much trouble for an outstanding human cultivator. When they were close to the Miao planet, Sun Xiaomiao stopped. "Senior brother, thank you for teaching me these principles along the way. I'm not an ignorant monkey. Senior brother, you've escorted me all the way, and you're worth it for me to do something for you." Then she opened her mouth, and a slaughter shard jumped out. Sun Xiaomiao was very serious. "Hurry up. It's going to run away if you're late." Lu Xiaoyi gave the palace's cat a meaningful look. The moment the Sparrow Palace appeared, the fragment disappeared without a trace. The palace's cat was taken aback by the speed at which the fragment disappeared. The palace's cat realized that the swordsman was not lying when he boasted about his ability to obtain fragments. Lu Xiaoyi looked at him. "Little Meow, are you going to send me away with a slaughter shard?" Chapter 1155. Sun Xiaomao felt awkward because her thoughts had been seen through by the swordsman. No matter how inexperienced she was, it was impossible for her to befriend a human in a year and a half. She only felt that the swordsman's robbery was very humane, so she was willing to lose a fragment to send this great god away. Lu Xiaoyi left the Sparrow Palace and took out the fragment again, instructing, "Swallow it." Little Meow obediently swallowed the fragment. At this point, she was sure that this swordsman had the same ability as her. In other words, if the swordsman wanted to get all 4 fragments, he only needed to kill her, wait for the fragments to separate, and collect them one by one. Then, why do you have to go with her and take off his pants to let out air? Lu Xiaoyi patted her on the shoulder. "Little Meow, humans are a complicated race. Some people have some quirks, and I'm one of them. If I don't feel at ease when I get it, then I'd rather not get it. Do you think that with my ability, it would be difficult to get a slaughter fragment in the fragrant grass trail?" Little Meow shook her head. "Senior, your ability is much stronger than mine, and you can also take fragments instantly. Not to mention one, even if it was 10, you would still take it." Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. "Little Meow, you're flattering me, but it's also the truth. I'm only doing this to tell you that the Tao fragments that are extremely precious in the eyes of the heavens chosen, no matter how many there are also ordinary in my eyes. I'm not bragging, right?" Little Meow was convinced. "Senior isn't bragging. You're really amazing." Lu Xiaoyi became serious. "I came here with you for 2 reasons. First, I don't think that the way you're helping your clansmen is right. So I think that you might be able to solve the problem without even using a single fragment. If I can prove this point, I want all 4 fragments. From my observation, Little Meow, you can't actually fuse with a slaughter fragment, right?" Little Meow nodded. "Senior's right. Little Meow doesn't know how to kill. But I don't know why, Senior Martial Brother. You clearly have the ability to obtain many fragments. Why didn't you do it yourself? Why'd you take a fancy to these 4 fragments of mine?" Lu Xiaoyi was Dafa. "Because you obtained it directly from the heavenly Tao. The karma that comes to me is negligible. Do you understand?" Little Meow muttered to herself, "So that's how it is. I said so, but I would rather be hated by the heavenly Tao." Lu Xiaoyi interrupted him. "We'll talk about you later. What I want to talk to you about now is the second point. From the perspective of us humans, there's one thing that will never change in the long river of history for any race, no matter how high or low they are, and that is the ability to adapt as a living being." Little Meow was puzzled. What? What is adaptive ability?" Lu Xiaoyi explained. "That is to say, Every living thing has a latent desire to survive. No matter what state they were in now, their final state would be closer to the environment. This is instinct, it's nature. A group of domestic pigs, if they're left in the wild without being fed, after a few generations, as long as they are still alive, they will become wild boars. Similarly, a group of domestic cats, if they are left in a lonely planet, after a few generations, without anyone to discipline them, they will also erupt with the nature in their blood and become free wild cats. At the same time, a small number of individuals will awaken the ability to cultivate. So I feel that your so-called method of awakening the wild nature of the slaughter fragments is not desirable. Either you have other intentions, or someone is instigating it from behind. Seeing the swordsman's burning gaze, little Meow finally couldn't resist and said vaguely, "No, it's not me. I don't have other intentions. I just want to cheer on my clansmen." Lu Xiaoyi didn't budge an inch. "Who is it? Who taught you to go to the fragrant grass trail?" Little Meow was struggling internally. The weight of the two humans in its heart was undecided. One was an old friend whom it had known for a long time and who had always cared for the cat race. He had even guided it to solve the cat race's problems. He was a good teacher and helpful friend. The other was an evil person whom it had known for less than 2 years. Usually his words were frivolous. He liked to make disgusting jokes, and he often showed his fists. Which one should it choose to believe? This was a problem. The swordsman raised his sandbag-sized fist again. It had been beaten up a lot along the way. It was very painful. In the end, evil triumphed over justice. Yes, it was a Taoist who called himself the Bird's Nest Elder. He came to the cat race more than 200 years ago, just when the surrounding human domains lost interest in the cat race. It was him who told me to go to the fragrant grass trail to get the slaughter fragments and save my clansmen. Senior, don't hurt him. He is very good to the cat race, and to me. It's been 200 years. He can't be faking it all the time. Lu Xiaoyi lowered his fist. Very good to the cat race? And the cat race on the cat race is still in the form of domestic cats after 200 years? Good to you? Can he not be good to you? Are you willing to take the risk to steal the fragments for him? Forget it. I promise you that I won't do anything to him before I find out the truth. But you have to know that if you dare to say anything about me, your old human friend will die, you will die, and the entire cat race and the cat race will be in big trouble. Little Meow was completely stunned. It didn't know why this evil person suddenly became fierce again. Or was this his true nature? It believed that it wouldn't give in easily in the face of a test, but this swordsman had already smoothed it out in the past 2 years, and it didn't have a trace of anger left. I won't say. Lu Xiaoyi walked over and changed from a fierce person to a good person. Little Meow, you don't understand how humans think. No one will stay here for 200 years to play hide-and-seek if it's not beneficial to their cultivation. I have a purpose. I want to get the 4 fragments without being tainted by the karma of the heavenly Tao. What is your friend's purpose? Have you thought about it? Is he purely good to you? Is he a cat reincarnated in his previous life? Then, tell me, where does your friend live? Let's go and meet him. You can tell him that I'm your new human friend, and I'm here to pick a pet cat on the cat race. The man and the cat approached the cat race. This was the smallest planet that Lu Xiaoyi had ever seen in the universe with an atmosphere. It was less than 100 miles wide, not suitable for humans, but suitable for small cats like the cat race. Passing through the atmosphere, under the aggressive gaze of the swordsman, Little Meow hesitated and pointed helplessly at a big river on the land. The cat race is very small, just a big river. The old man lives and cultivates on the snow mountain at the source of the river. He never comes down to harass the cat race, and always takes out delicious food to feed them. Lu Xiaoyi glanced around and roughly understood the layout of the cat race. The end of the long river, the snow mountain accumulated water. It was a good place to store things. A laxative could make all the cats on the cat race have diarrhea. Unfortunately, Little Meow, who had never lived in the human world, didn't understand this simple logic. Chapter 11:56. Little Meow led the way while Lu Xiaoyi followed behind. In a short while, they arrived at the so-called Snow Mountain that was less than 1,000 feet tall. The Star Hill was small. It was a miniature version. Little Meow was familiar with the place and went straight to a cave halfway up the mountain. Lu Xiaoyi followed behind leisurely. As soon as they entered the cave, a deep voice laughed. Little Meow, you're back? And you brought a new friend? Let me see who has such good eyesight to know that my little Meow is innocent and kind. Little Meow was running forward when an old man with white hair and beard appeared at the corner. It was the bird's nest elder that Little Meow was talking about. The old man opened his arms and looked very happy, as if he was hugging his friend of hundreds of years. At this moment, Little Meow's expression changed, and she shouted, "No!" A gray light appeared behind Little Meow. It was so close that even a deity could not avoid it, not to mention a person who was completely unprepared. The bird's nest elder was hit directly. Instantly, the sword energy exploded and his body was torn into countless particles. At the same time, the Tao dissipation celestial phenomenon appeared. Sun Xiaomao shouted angrily, "Why? You promised me. You said you want to find out the truth first. You didn't even say a word to him." Lu Xiaoyi shrugged. "I lied to you. I hate dealing with these old pedants the most in my life. They're too cunning. They have too many inexplicable trump cards. I only have one sword. I don't know enough to guard against them. Talk." After a few words, this old man will be suspicious. When that time comes, I won't have the time to play with him. Little Meow, you need to read more books, especially novels. In them, bad guys like this are the hardest to deal with. Why don't we just go straight to the point and get it done once and for all? Sun Xiaomao lost control and rushed forward. She was hit by a fist and flipped a dozen times in the air. The evil man was calm. "Let me help you calm down first. Remember, don't believe the words of humans so easily, especially when the swordsman said to find out the truth first. Let me tell you a secret. The swordsman always kills first before finding out the truth, because we're afraid of trouble." Sun Xiaomiao wanted to cry, but had no tears. Because of her, she had caused the death of an old man who had treated her as a junior for the past 200 years. It would never forgive this evil man. Lu Xiaoyi continued to walk in and kicked Little Meows, but while he was at it, "Get up, don't play dead. Let's go find the truth now." Sun Xiaomao gritted her teeth and followed behind. Looking at the back of the person in front of her, there were countless times when she wanted to jump up and bite his neck, but it also knew that this was impossible. The wickedness, hatred, and capriciousness of this wicked man were simply unimaginable to it. Even now, it was starting to miss that Heaven's Choice cultivator. At least it could still see through his hypocrisy, but this evil man's shamelessness was hidden in the spring breeze. By the time you wake up from your stupor, the mistake will have already been made. One man and one beast walked around in circles in the cave. This cave was like a maze. Many places were isolated by array formations. If Lu Xiaoyi hadn't killed the owner immediately, they wouldn't have been able to see anything. This was because the Nestle old man had countless ways to destroy the corpse and hide the secret. Since the owner was dead, it was much easier to break the array formation. In addition, the array formation was one of Lu Xiaoyi's few unorthodox skills. He didn't use brute force to break the array formation, which was the most helpless method. In the deepest part of the cave, several secret arrays were activated. In the depths of the cave, there was a faint sound of water flowing. Lu Xiaoyi lectured Sun Xiaomao as they walked. Why would a generous and selfless person set up so many arrays here? What was he guarding against? Against those house cats? Don't look so bitter and vengeful. Use your brain. People say that horses are thin and have long hair. I think you're just an idiot with long hair. Sun Xiaomao endured the pain of losing an old friend and the ruthless sarcasm of the murderer. She felt that there was no more light in her life. There was nothing left to live for. When they came to the place where the water flowed, they looked at the direction of the water flow and judged that it came from the melting snow of the snow mountain. The water was very shallow. There was a huge array formation on the bluestone below, which was still operating normally. From the way it flowed, every drop of snow mountain water will be transformed by the array. She scooped up a handful of water and put it into her mouth. She couldn't distinguish the taste, so she immediately spat it out. She cursed, "This is King evil. Will I contract some strange disease after drinking a mouthful? Maybe I'll get pregnant?" She pointed at the array. "Do you understand it? If you don't, go and find your old friend's array, jade slip, to study it. When you understand it, then come and talk to me. I hate idiots the most. They were betrayed and still help others count the spiritual stones. They even want to avenge others. Do you want to set up a memorial tablet for him every year?" The villain had left. She didn't know if he had really left or if he had gone to do something else. Would he come back? Sun Xiaomao was left alone in the cave, not knowing what to do. She really wanted to leave without a care. But now it was at the end of its rope. The slaughter fragments could help her people regain their wild nature. This was what the Niao old man had taught her, but she had no idea how to do it. The Niao old man had said that he would help her. Now that the old man was dead, how could she, a mere palace's cat, know how to use the slaughter fragments? All of its efforts had been reduced to nothing by that evil man's casual attack. Now, the only thing it could do was carefully study the formation in the water. If what the evil man said was true, then was there any other way to help its clansmen? Yuan Ying was intelligent, especially for cats, especially the palace's cats. Although she didn't know much about arrays, if she only had a specific array and the jade slips in the Niao old man's room, it wouldn't be too difficult to find out the real purpose of the array. A year later, Sun Xiaomao, who had gained some knowledge, turned off the array and completely destroyed it. She went out of the cave and found the buried Niao old man's body. She walked around the Miao planet, but didn't find any trace of the villain. Maybe he had gone to the void of the universe, which made her feel lost. Then she began to stroke the river from the beginning to the end to see if there were any other clues hidden in the water. Sure enough, she found 2 more clues. She forgot about cultivation and just spent her time on all the natural phenomena on the Miao planet. Springs, lakes, streams, forests, grasslands. She mobilized all the big and small cat monsters on the Miao planet, but she didn't find anything suspicious. After 10 years, another generation of cats on the Miao planet had passed, and a new generation of cats began to grow. To her surprise, the kittens began to show some adaptability in the harsh environment. Although there were often deaths and injuries, they were no longer domestic cats. As the only cat ancestor on the Miao planet, she knew very well. She often looked up at the starry sky and knew that the villain would definitely come back because he hadn't received his reward yet. This was not a person who did good without expecting anything in return. He was a villain. Chapter 1157. On this day in the 12th year, Sun Xiaomiao suddenly felt something. She looked up at the sky and saw a Taoist slowly descending from the peak of the snowy mountain. This was also a habit of humans. They had to descend to the highest point. It was also a psychological effect. She was thinking that in the future, when she set up traps for humans, she could use this as a basis. Every trap would be accurate. Sun Xiaomiao's feelings were very complicated. She had hated and respected this person. When she hated him, she wanted to eat his flesh. When she respected him, she subconsciously wanted to take him as her teacher. But now, the emotion that dominated it was that it couldn't let go of its pride. After all, cats also cared about their pride, not pigs. No matter what, she still had to go and meet him. Although she did not know what to say, she still had to face him. This time, she had learned something that she would never understand in her life. It was worth it. Lu Xiaoyi wandered in the void of the universe for 12 years, not to relax, but to look for spiritual opportunity. The spiritual vigor in this area was neither rich nor poor. It was ordinary. It could not survive, nor could it starve to death. After 12 years of searching and swallowing, and with the last of his savings, he finally managed to raise his cultivation to the level of a 7-inch infant. He immediately withdrew his troops and returned to the imperial court. After eating a big meal, it was hard to endure. Selling vegetables and tofu was the best. Searching for spiritual opportunity in rich minds was also good. It was this kind of scattered spiritual opportunity that gave him a headache. It could not be said that there was no spiritual opportunity. It could not be said that there was abundant spiritual opportunity. The spiritual opportunity was not piled up, but strand by strand. It was annoying. It had been 12 years. It should be time to reap the rewards. If this palace's cat did not understand, he would kill it with a punch. As soon as he descended into the atmosphere, he scanned with his spiritual sense. The slight changes of the cat race were already in his mind. Although it was impossible to restore everything, in time, in less than 3 generations, the cat race of Meow Star would be an independent race again. This was the greatness of blood. Every living creature had it. It was the nature of spirituality. As if he had already forgotten the unhappiness of the past, Lu Xiaoyi took out a pot of wine and poured himself a drink. Tell me, what truth did you find out? Don't let me be known as a person who kills without teaching. Xiao Miao immediately relaxed. In the face of this almost shameless calmness, she found that she could not resist. She walked forward and naturally handed over the freshly hunted mountain food to accompany the wine. Senior brother, what if I can't find out the truth? Lu Xiaoyi happily took a sip of wine and lectured. What should we do? That would be dereliction of duty. He was incompetent. If you can't find out, can't you make it up? Little Meow sighed in her heart. She knew it would be like this. You believe me? Lu Xiaoyi rolled his eyes. If I want to believe it, then I'll definitely believe it. Because if I believed it, my heart would be at ease. Who cares how ridiculous your story is? Time has passed, and history is a blur. How can there be any truth? Wasn't he just lying to himself? Kitten's son complained in her heart. She still wanted to get to the bottom of the matter. Senior Marshal brother, when you do things like this, won't you feel uneasy if you make a mistake? Lu Xiaoyi snorted. First of all, I never dream. Secondly, I've never failed to find the truth. Little Meow sighed in admiration. She understood what senior brother meant. If it wasn't a dream, it meant that senior brother's starting point had always been open and above board. If he could always find this after the fact, it meant that he never made mistakes in his judgment. It was too difficult to do this. It required experience, insight, knowledge, judgment, experience in the world of mortals, and a clear mind. He could kill first and then find the truth. She was afraid that she could only find the truth first and then kill. This was fate. No one could force it. Now that the small talk was over, it was time to get down to business. Little Meow said respectfully, Senior Marshal brother, I flipped through all the jade slips in Nestle's cave. Fortunately, he has the habit of taking notes. This allowed me to understand the whole truth of the matter. Nestle's visit to Meow Planet was not accidental. It was intentional. It was after the nearby human domains began to lose interest in Meow Planet. By chance, I heard from a human cultivator who had been to Meow Planet before that if the Meow Planet Cat clan stepped into the path of cultivation, they might awaken a very special theurgy. It's the theurgy of cheek pouch space, which can capture all things. This person was an itinerant cultivator who cultivated both alchemy and array formations. It was difficult for him to cultivate. Therefore, under the general trend of the collapse of the Great Tao, he had an idea. He wanted to decipher the secret of the cat clan's cheek pouch theurgy from Meow Planet. It would be best if he could cultivate it himself. Otherwise, he wanted to create a cheek pouch space. Therefore, he came here and stayed for 200 years. Lu Xiaoyi didn't interrupt. He let Little Meow make up her own story. No, she said it herself. The specific process was very complicated. This old man experimented with all kinds of things. He treated the lives of the cat clan as a joke. He made many mistakes, and the result was that he wanted to obtain the substance to form the theurgy from the cat clan. But his experiment was very unsuccessful. Therefore, he wanted me to help him obtain the fragment of the Great Tao for his own personal benefit. He wanted a few suitable test subjects. Now, I have destroyed all his arrangements. The great river has returned to normal. The cat clan of this generation has also gradually recovered their spirituality. All of this depends on senior brother's judgment. I don't dare to say that I will repay your kindness. I can only wait for the future. I wanted to be your pet or slave and serve you, but I'm afraid my strength will be a burden to senior brother. Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand. Let's forget about the last sentence. Don't say this kind of fake politeness in the future. But from this lesson, do you understand anything? Little Meow thought for a moment. Many things. People's hearts, trust, interests. Lu Xiaoyi interrupted him. You're all just a bunch of hypocrites. Let me tell you what you should learn. Taking notes is a good habit, but you must learn how to destroy evidence. It's okay to be a bad person, but if you don't clean up your butt, then you're asking for death. Little Meow blushed with shame. Senior brother was always so unscrupulous. His words made people feel that he made sense. It's not that Nestle doesn't know how to destroy evidence. It's just that senior brother's actions are too fast. This is why you kill first, and then find out the truth, right? Lu Xiaoyi took a sip of wine, pleased with himself. And at least it wasn't so stupid that it couldn't be saved. Actually, when did he have so many thoughts? It was purely because he was lazy to use his brain to save trouble. Of course, he couldn't say this. It would lose the demeanor of an expert. Little Meow stood up and slowly opened its mouth. It remembered senior brother's advice. Now is the time for it to pay back. Besides, this thing was useless to it now. Keeping it would be a path to disaster. For slaughter, shards flew out one by one, about to break through the air. Lu Xiaoyi, who was at the side, swept up the Sparrow Palace and caught one of them. The other three rose into the air and flew into the sky. Little Meow was anxious. Senior brother, if we delay any longer, I'm afraid it won't be easy to chase. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. If it's not easy to chase, then let's not chase. What's the point of chasing? They have their destined masters. Since we can't use them, let's set them free. In the blink of an eye, the three fragments broke through the air layer and disappeared into the universe. When their aura could no longer be felt, Lu Xiaoyi felt a burst of joy in his nascent soul. He jumped up and stood firmly on the 7th inch of the nascent soul. This time, he broke through when he was just close to the 7-inch nascent soul. It was a surprise, pretending he was right. Chapter 1158. Little Meow, who was at the side, seemed to have understood something and felt much more relaxed. Knowing that the karma it had with the heavenly Tao had disappeared, it felt very grateful. Senior brother was an out-and-out evil person, but he was also the evil person that it respected the most. The things that he did were things that the majority of virtuous people could not do. This made it ponder deeply. What should a cultivator persevere in? Who should place the 3 fragments? This was very particular. If Little Meow placed them, its karma would disappear. If Senior Brother took them all and placed the 3 fragments, Senior Brother would be more favored by the heavens than now. Senior Brother only took 1 fragment. Lu Xiaoyi was still muttering there. 10 years to get 1 fragment. This efficiency is a bit low. I say, Little Meow, is there any astronomical phenomenon with more spiritual vigor in the nearby airspace? I've been hanging around here for more than 10 years, and I've never had enough spiritual vigor. Little Meow blushed with shame. It felt that the spiritual vigor around Meow Planet was very abundant. But it was no wonder Senior Brother had a big appetite. It was normal for Senior Brother to be dissatisfied with what it felt satisfied with. So it explained, Senior Brother, I'm still very familiar with the vicinity of Meow Planet. It's the space where I usually move around. The density of spiritual vigor is roughly like this. There aren't any astronomical phenomena that are too complicated or dangerous. Senior Brother, if you want to find places with abundant spiritual vigor, I'm afraid you have to go further. I rarely set foot in the vicinity of Meow Planet. But there's a place that Senior Brother doesn't want to go. It's about 2 months' journey in the direction of Black Chain. There's not even a blade of grass growing there. There's not even a trace of spiritual vigor. I don't know why. Lu Xiaoyi asked casually. Extinct spirit? I seem to have been there before. There's no astronomical phenomenon, right? It's also very strange. Little Meow smiled and said, It's very strange. But that's not the only strange thing. I've been a nascent soul for 800 years. My range of activity has always been around Meow Planet. But in the recent few hundred years, I've always been able to find human cultivators appearing at that extinct spirit location. It's also very strange. There's no spiritual vigor, no astronomical phenomenon. It's empty. What's the point of staying there? Lu Xiaoyi's interest was piqued. Oh, have you interacted with them? Or observed what they were doing? Where did you go? Have you been to Meow Planet? Little Meow was very embarrassed. Senior brother, how would a lone demonic beast like me dare to go up and interact with humans? Don't give yourself up again. Not to mention observing them in secret. If it led to a misunderstanding, there would be no way to explain it. As long as he doesn't come to Meow Planet, I can't be bothered to care about him. He looked at Lu Xiaoyi and said, Senior brother, do you want me to show you around? Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand. I've been there before, but I didn't know there was such a strange place. Why would I need you to lead the way? Cultivators of our generation should not meddle in other people's affairs recklessly. Doing what is within the scope of one's abilities is the true Tao. Your task now is to take care of everything on Meow Planet and focus on your own cultivation. Don't worry about anything else. The great Tao is collapsing, and demons are running amok. Incidents like the Nestle are not rare. You have to be careful. Let's part ways here. See you never again. Lu Xiaoyi left as soon as he said he would. He leaped high into the sky, and with another leap, he was already out of the atmosphere, disappearing from sight. Little Meow slowly knelt down and paid her respects. This trip to the fragrant grass trail was filled with danger, anger, and surprise. Towards humans, she was no longer as timid as before. Although humans were mostly bad people, there were also some who were bad and unique, which made her want to imitate them. She had finally solved the problem of Meow Planet. More importantly, in the process, she had learned a lot and understood a lot of principles. These were more important to her future than any cultivation methods, pills, artifacts, or even fragments. She had a reason to kneel. Lu Xiaoyi swept across the void in a relaxed mood. He was heading in the direction of the 4 stars black chain that Little Meow had mentioned. It was not that he was really interested in this place, but he was just casually walking around. Since he needed a large amount of spiritual opportunity now, why not come over and take a look? With his personality, he actually liked to eat a lot. The best way was to sell the Great Tao. But the Heavenly Tao had rewarded him by letting go of the Great Tao, so he could not do this in the future. Next was to find a radish field with spiritual opportunity. It would be good if there were radishes everywhere, so he did not have to move much with his spiritual opportunity. Therefore, he was more interested in more special places. Like this kind of place where spiritual energy was absent. Did it mean that there was a beautiful direction? He was not sure. Little Meow's range of activity was basically within a few months of flying with Meow Planet as the center. This was actually not considered small. For a lonely yuanying demon beast, this was a more normal range of activity. After all, not every cultivator had the same strength as him, and Little Meow did not have any companions. After flying for a few months, he arrived at the place that Little Meow had mentioned. He had passed by this place in a hurry before, so he did not pay much attention to it. He only knew that there was very little spiritual opportunity here, so he did not think much about it. But now, it seemed that this place was not just little, it was basically non-existent. In the void of the universe, there were indeed many places like this where spiritual opportunity was scarce, and the reasons were different. Usually, cultivators would pass by these places in a hurry, not lingering. But this space was so scarce that there was not even a wisp of spiritual opportunity. This was not normal, except for one situation. This was the place where the positive and negative space was connected. He often encountered this situation himself. For example, the entrance to the negative space in Zhou Xian, Changshuo, Taigu, and so on. Careless cultivators would think that this was because human cultivators often visited these places, so the spiritual opportunity had been plucked clean. But in fact, there was another possibility. The spiritual opportunity had its own instincts towards the positive and negative space passage. They were unwilling to be passively drawn into another space when the passage opened, so they stayed far away from it. In other words, this place could actually be a transition passage between the positive and negative space. After circling around this area twice, he, who was already a veteran of the positive and negative space transition, quickly determined a more suitable location. Then he took out the negative space raft that he had obtained in Taigu and began to gather energy. Time passed slowly. After 2 hours, the passage was successfully formed. The raft drilled into it and disappeared. In the next moment, in the negative space, Lu Xiaoyi looked around. It was dark and empty. There was only a big meteorite not far away. That was the place where the navigation mark was hidden. This location was completely different from the direction of Changsha. Even if the key was open to the highest level, only 4 points would appear. This meant that there were 4 navigation marks around, but he still didn't know which one corresponded to which one. He decided to explore one by one to find the corresponding location of the main world. At the very least, he had to determine which direction was away from Zhou and which was close to Zhou There was nothing he could do about the life of running around. Since the white brows refused to see him, he decided that it was better to take the initiative of his fate in his own hands. He thought that if something really happened, these big shots would naturally tell him the right way. But now, it seemed that this was not necessarily the case. He couldn't completely rely on the charity of others. It was always better to be prepared in advance. Anyway, he had nothing else to do. He could just treat it as gathering spiritual opportunity in the positive and negative space while exploring the way. The most precious thing in the cultivation world was the map. Chapter 1159. Lu Xiaoyi was very casual this time, so he gained very little from the spiritual opportunity. This was because the amount of spiritual opportunity in the negative space was much less than that in the main world. However, he was able to determine the location of the waymarks very smoothly. This was also reasonable because the Miao star was not too far from Zhou in the main world. Specifically, in the negative space, it was probably only 2 waymarks away. It was impossible that he could not find the way home. Out of the 4 waymarks, he gained something from the first one. This was because before he came out of the main world, he found the waymark of Heaven's Choice. He was more familiar with it and could see it from Changsha. Now, it was just in a different direction. He did not continue to go deeper. Instead, he focused on the 4 waymarks. The location of the second waymark was unknown. After he left the main world, he could not figure out. This was because there were no cultivation realms in the nearby airspace. He could not find the corresponding location of the main world. The third waymark was the location of the main world that he was familiar with. It was not far from the place where he met Xia Bingji when he first went out into the universe after he became a nascent soul. The fourth waymark could be seen in the negative space, where Zhou Xian's unique imprint could be seen. With a rough judgment in his heart, he returned to the Miao star's waymark and used his authority to check the number of people who had passed through recently. The frequency was within the normal range. Then, he rushed to the second waymark and used his authority to check it again. This time, he immediately discovered the mystery. The frequency of the second waymark was unexpectedly high. It far exceeded the 20 waymark points that he had experienced. Then what did this mean? He returned to the main world from the second waymark. This time, he decided that no matter how far the surrounding human cultivation realms were, he must find one. In order to find a domain with human cultivators in the void of the main world, there were certain techniques. For example, one had to determine the density of celestial bodies, the direction of spiritual aura, the number of void beasts, and the reverse. Of course, the best method was to meet a cultivator from a nearby star field. This was often the case in life. When you were hiding and did not want to meet someone, that person would endlessly pounce on you. When he wanted to find someone to ask for directions, it was as if they were all dead. A universe may not be big, but if you run in circles, it will be very big. Lu Xiaoyi circled around the entry and exit points, which took him several months. Of course, he was also collecting spiritium as he flew. He planned to collect spiritium in this airspace until he completely understood the actual map of this airspace. We focused on harvesting spiritual opportunity. Things finally changed. A few months later, he met two groups of people fighting in the universe. It was not for the battle of spiritual vigor, which was the most commonly seen in the void, but for a large meteorite, which had a diameter of several hundred feet, which was not very regular. What was special about this meteorite was that it was made of a rare blue crystal with very high purity, which could be used in weapons almost without refining. It was a relatively superior material for refining weapons, which was suitable for the power transmission of space rafts. In the world of cultivation, it was also a strategic resource. The two groups of cultivators were all body cultivators. One group had curly hair and long beards, looking proud and mighty. There were as many as 7 of them, and they were all in the Yuanying realm. From the characteristics of their supernatural powers, they were from the same sect. The other group had tattoos on their bare left shoulders. The totem was mysterious, and a fierce aura could be felt from afar. There were 6 of them, and they were all in the Yuanying realm. They were not at a disadvantage when fighting with their opponents. They were fighting for control of the blue crystal. From the looks of it, the winner would be the one to drag it away. Who knew if the two groups were from the same realm? Or were they from different realms? Who was more powerful, permed hair or tattooed hair? That was the question. They were body cultivators after all. When they fought, they were not as flashy as Taoists and monks. They also did not have as many artistic conceptions. Their fights were basically fist to the flesh, and skin to flesh would be torn open. The 13 Dharma forms galloped in the void, rushing back and forth, shouting continuously. It was a very visual effect. Lu Xiaoyi watched from afar. There was nothing profound about the battle. He could tell that they were all ordinary body meridian orthodoxies from small realms. They relied on the body meridian orthodoxy's unique rough skin and thick flesh. They were brave and fearless. Their supernatural powers were also very ordinary. There were few things that would make one's eyes light up. He could not go forward to mediate the fight. It was unreasonable, and he was not in the mood to do so. Body cultivators in an excited state were the most unreasonable, especially when there were 13 of them. If he rushed in recklessly, he would very likely become the target of public criticism. It was not that he was afraid of anything, but there was no need to. There should be a purpose in fighting. He could not waste his energy. After watching for a few days, he could see the knack of it. In these few days, everyone was lightly injured. There were also a few who were heavily injured, but there was not a single one who died. He then understood that this was not the first time the two sides had fought. Under the appearance of risking life and limb, they still had a sense of propriety. Hence, he made a decision. The two groups of vicious people were fighting intensely. To body cultivators of their physiques, these few days of fighting was just the beginning. According to their habits, they wouldn't stop fighting for at least a month. They wouldn't stop until one side had no one left to fight. It was also at this moment that in the eyes of the body cultivators, an unfamiliar Taoist appeared on the blue-patterned crystal meteorite. He took out a pot of wine and drank while watching, looking very carefree. There were also some who were impulsive. A perm Taoist casually threw a huge rock at him. This was a kind of test, but not a killing blow. The meaning was very simple. If he could not take it, then he could get lost. Lu Xiaoyi was in a difficult position. He was also unwilling to kill this group of people. It did not make sense. He wanted to let them know his strength without hurting them. This was a test of his foundation. If he could not attack, then he would defend. A beam of sword light slashed forward, and a path of nothingness followed the sword. This was not an alternate dimension, but pure nothingness. It was the basic application of the great path of the void. However, he was getting more and more familiar with it now. The huge rock came with a majestic momentum. This body cultivator's favorite fighting style was actually not that simple. It was very difficult to dodge. In order to show that he was calm, he could not dodge. This would lose the demeanor of a master. Under the gaze of the body cultivators, the huge rock seemed to become modeled in the instant before it hit the Taoist. It seemed unreal. This was only a momentary feeling. When they focused again, the huge rock was still the same huge rock. However, the huge rock's position had already passed the Taoist body due to its rapid speed. They did not know whether the Taoist had become nothingness when the huge rock and the Taoist had collided, or did the rock become nothingness. However, there was one point. This sword technique was very high-end. There was not a trace of smoke or fire. This also indirectly proved the strength of the swordsman. Among the countless orthodoxies in the universe, the sword vein and the body vein were a pair of enemies with a very complicated relationship. They were both rejected by the orthodox Taoists, but they were also secretly competing with each other. In the fifth ring, the sword vein and the body vein's relationship was very bad. However, after leaving the universe and the void, the two veins were not so hostile, because the sword vein was too rare and the body vein was innumerable. Many body cultivators did not have any hatred when they met a rare creature like the swordsman in the void. The body cultivator who threw the rock shouted, "What a beautiful sword technique!" Fellow Taoist, are you here to get a share of this blue pattern crystal? Chapter 1160. Lu Xiaoyi laughed heartily. That's not it. This poor Taoist is lost and would like to ask for directions. I was planning to ask for a result, but I don't know how long I'll have to wait. I'm very sorry to have disturbed everyone. Why don't we have an intermission? He was very direct. He had to be more direct when it came to physique meridians. He couldn't be as pretentious as he was when it came to Dharma cultivators and monks. One of the tattoos shouted, "I heard that the swordsman's flying sword is attacking the invincible universe. Why don't you show us?" This was the way of physique cultivators. It depended on your strength. If you were strong, you could be the peacemaker. If you weren't strong enough, you could go to the side. It was very straightforward. Lu Xiaoyi smiled faintly, and a sword light shot out from the top of his head. 1 part, 100 parts, 10,000 parts, and in the next moment, 2 part, 300,000 sword lights had already converged into a surging sword river, rushing back and forth in the battlefield like a man-eating giant dragon, and its might was soul-stirring. Over the years, he hadn't improved quickly in terms of the number of sword lights. From the tens of thousands of sword lights when he first formed his nascent soul, he could only divide 300,000 sword lights at most now. With his speed of improvement, it was a little slow. The reason for this was that he had put most of his energy into the sword layer. The sword layer, to put it bluntly, was the speed of sword light division. For a normal swordsman, the number of sword light divisions was usually around 10. 10 was already very impressive. In other words, a normal swordsman could divide 10 sword lights into 100, then 1,000, 10,000. If this swordsman's limit was 100,000 sword lights, he would need to divide 5 times. In other words, the sword layer would be 5 times. This was relatively weak because division required time. Moreover, there would be a decrease in power after every division. When it finally reached its peak, it would waste time again, and its power would decrease 5 times. This was the essence of weakness. Lu Xiaoyi was different. His first fission speed was over 100, and he only needed 3 fissions to reach the maximum level of sword light division. This meant that there were 3 sword layers. Due to the uniqueness of the Sparrow Palace's sword, the first fission didn't seem to decrease in strength. When it reached its strongest state, it would only decrease in strength twice. This was the reason why his flying sword was always successful. Therefore, the ability of a swordsman could not be measured by the number of sword rays he could produce. It was very one-sided. Strength came from many aspects. Lu Xiaoyi's current goal was to achieve the fastest fission. Currently, he was at the 3rd fission stage of Sword Layer 3. If he could reach the second fission stage of Sword Layer 2 in the future, that would be a qualitative improvement. However, it seemed that it would be very difficult to achieve this during Yuaniing. Perhaps he would have to wait until he became a monarch. None of the body cultivators were amateurs. The moment the swordsman brandished his sword, they immediately saw through his true abilities. It had to be said that this sword technique was more than enough to act as a peacemaker. With a consensus, the 13 body cultivators landed on the meteorite one after another. This allowed Lu Xiaoyi to heave a sigh of relief. As expected, there were benefits to not resorting to the foolish method of exterminating one sect after another. If he really did make a move, the 13 of them would probably immediately unite. It wasn't that he would be in danger, but it would be completely opposite to his goal. What was a proper slaughter? This was a question that he had been pondering over ever since he obtained the slaughter shard. In this case, it was just a small matter that might offend the body cultivators of a small realm. However, if this kind of desire to slaughter were to control him, he might end up offending the entire cultivation world. He might even drag his own sect down with him. Obviously, although these two body cultivator sects came from different realms, they had a very deep relationship with each other. Although they were fighting with no regard for their own lives, some things could be seen from the way they sat down. They were also quite vicious. If a passing cultivator were to recklessly participate in this battle, the result would be obvious. Dealing with these straightforward people was very easy for Lu Xiaoyi. In other words, he just had to be rough. He took out the fine wine from the 2 storage rings, as well as countless delicacies. These things aren't necessarily good, but they come from a distant world. I'll be the drinking game. Drink up, eat up, and then you guys can continue fighting while I continue on my way. The body cultivators roared with applause. This swordsman's temper was quite good. He was not pretentious at all. No wonder he was a fellow sufferer who was suppressed by the Taoists. After 3 rounds of drinking, some body cultivators finally remembered the important matter. A perm man named Zong Cheng shouted in a rough voice, "Where's Brother Shan going? Let's hear it. I want to see if anyone knows." Lu Xiaoyi headed towards the Dafa, the upper realm of Zhouxian. Have any of you heard of it? This point was 3 points away from the exit of Zhouxian. This meant that the distance in the main world was probably more than 10 universes in a straight line. This was already a very long distance. Generally, Yuanian cultivators from small realms would not travel so far. The upper realm of Zhouxian boasted of being the first realm in the universe. In fact, it was just boasting behind closed doors. It was very famous in the nearby universes, but not so far away. Space was 3-dimensional, and the surrounding universes of Zhouxian were also 3-dimensional. A simple mathematical model would show that if one flew in a straight line out of 3 universes, they would be out of the range of influence of Zhouxian. The number of cultivators who could hear of Zhouxian's famous name would become fewer and fewer. It was still the same saying that only a fierce dragon would cross the river. For most Yuanian cultivators, it was normal for them to wander around the universe of their own realm. How many of them dare to travel alone, like Lu Xiaoyi? Sure enough, the 13 people, regardless of whether they had permed hair or tattoos, all shook their heads in unison. Lu Xiaoyi was discouraged. You don't even know this. You still dare to talk about wandering in the universe? Why don't you punish yourself with 3 cups of wine? All the cultivators cheered and cleanly punished themselves with 3 cups of wine. This made Lu Xiaoyi regain his senses. After all, this was not a gambling game in the mortal world. Punishing himself with 3 cups of wine was useless. Taigu, Changshuo realm. Have you heard of it? The 13 cultivators shook their heads in unison. Then, they looked at him with sparkling eyes. They were obviously looking forward to his 3 cups of wine. Lu Xiaoyi acted as a drinking game and shouted, "You don't know this, you don't know that. Did I ask too much? Fine, I'll punish myself with 3 cups of wine." All the cultivators laughed heartily. Language was an art. In certain situations, it was even more powerful than the realm of Tao. Lu Xiaoyi knew this very well. With just 2 short sentences of a drinking game, He was able to get along well with the cultivators and dissolve the estrangement between them. Of course, this was only a good beginning. How their relationship would develop in the future still depended on how they interacted with each other. They were far from being friends. However, if it was just asking for directions and being drinking buddies, that was enough. He had indeed been to many universes in the years when he was forming his nascent soul. Although he did not go to many realms, on the map of the Zhou Upper Realm, the more famous realms in the dozens of nearby universes were clearly marked. If he did not say anything and asked them one by one, could it be that they had not heard of any of them? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.